All right, welcome everybody to Standing for Truth. My name is Donny, and I am your host for today's program. On Standing for Truth, we defend the truth of biblical creation. We also host some awesome guests on the program. Today, it is a privilege, as always, to have Dr. Peter Line with me for this valuable program. Peter and I are going to continue our comprehensive investigation into the hominin fossil record. Throughout this series, we have looked at many of the most famous icons of human evolution. These include the Australopithecines, such as Lucy, Homo habilis, Homo naledi, Hobbit, or Homo floresiensis, and Littlefoot. Today, we continue examining the human evolution from a young Earth creationist perspective, with a major focus specifically on Homo erectus. And before I hand it over to Peter, who I do appreciate the time that he's given for this comprehensive series, I do want to give him a formal introduction for anybody unfamiliar with Peter. And so Peter's undergraduate majors were in biophysics and instrumental science. After this, he completed master's and PhD degrees in the area of neuroscience, focusing on brain electrophysiology, and spent over a decade involved in such research. Subsequently, he worked as a university lecturer, teaching in the area of anatomy and physiology for over a decade. Peter has been interested in the creation evolution issue ever since becoming a Christian, as evolution was a stumbling block to him, believing God's word was true. He has had a particular interest in the so-called hominid fossils for many years and has published several articles on the subject. Now, since this is an ongoing series that Peter and I have been doing since late last year, I do want to recommend people check the description box. Where in the description box, I have part 1 and also part 2 for people to check out, as we've been focusing on different hominids each episode. And so with that, Peter, as always, it is a privilege to have you. I hope you've been well. I hope you're having a great 2024 so far. And it's great to have you, Peter. Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you very much. And I guess hello to everyone. So in this, hang on, just trying to get the thing to work. Hang on. But the slide is not projecting. What is going on? Hang on.
No rush.
I might just...
I do have it on screen for you.
I'm just trying to get it to forward.
I think I might know if you click on it with your mouse. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah,
usually now it works. Usually when you do the arrow, it works. But anyhow, that's all right. Yeah. Okay. So that, yeah. And I just got to go. I go back. All right. Okay. So we're going to focus on Homo erectus. Okay. So I'll do a bit of an introduction to the history of it, and then we'll look at some of the features of it, and it's sort of it ever since that the beginning of finding this thing, it's been sort of immersed in controversy, and today is no different. But anyhow, it all started with in the late 19th century with Eugene Debye, a Dutch scientist, and he was and I think I got feedback last time that when I read from a slide, I go too quick. So I'm going to try to slow down a bit. Okay, so I just try that. So because some people look at it from a mobile phone and it's hard to read. Anyhow, so late in the 19th century, and obsessed with the goal of finding the missing link between apes and human, Eugene Debye he embarked on a journey to Indonesia, which then was known as the Dutch East Indies. So between November 1890 and October 1982, he found the fossil remains of what he adamantly regarded as being a missing link, and it consisted of a skull cap, a femur, a scrap of jawbone, and a couple of teeth. And then he returned to Europe in 1895, where he supposed missed a link, which was named Pithecanthropus erectus, meaning ape-like man. This was had been suggested earlier by Ernst Haeckel. Ernst Haeckel was, the one that coined the phrase ontogeny recapitulates, phylogeny, meaning that the development of an organism goes through the adult evolutionary stages in its development, and that's since been shown to be fraudulent. But anyhow, he was also the inspiration for Eugene Debye. Okay, but anyhow, when he returned to Europe, his supposed missing link was not greeted with the acceptance he had hoped for it. So this shows you the Cranial skull cap, which the main find, which by Eugene Debye, which is sort of called, nicknamed Java Man, and classified as Pithecanthropus erectus, now Homo erectus, and basically it's the holotype that is the type specimen of Homo erectus. So it's found from Cranial, East Java, Indonesia, discovered in 1891. So they've estimated its cranial capacity at about 940 cubic centimeters or milliliters, and allegedly dated to about 700,000 years ago. Now, the femur, the thigh bone of Pithecanthropus erectus, was regarded as essentially modern, but the skull cap was used as archaic. So that led many scientists of the time to doubt their association. So one of the first responses to a monograph by Debye about his missing link was written by a paleontologist called Richard Lydekker in the journal Nature. And his remark concerning the skull was that there appears every reason to regard it as that of a microcephalous idiot of an unusual elongated type. So this was the birth of Homo erectus, a species that has never ceased to generate debate and controversy, as it still does today. Now, there were important finds after Dubye's Java Man. You had the Neanderthal fossils and the Australopithecus Afarensis skull, known as tongue skull, found by Raymond Dart. I don't know how many times that story has been retold, so I don't bore people with retelling that story. And there was also the fraudulent Piltdown Man, which probably most people have heard of. But the next fossil of real impact was Peking Man from China, another Homo erectus. So the skull was discovered in 1929. I think I got it sort of here. But it was actually anticipated based on a pair of teeth as given the name Neanderthals pekinensis several years earlier, meaning the Chinese man of Peking. So you can see there it is here. So I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I've got you on full screen if you wanted to hold it up, Peter.
Okay, yeah. So that's it here. So you can see here.
Yes.
So this is actually a composite sort of a skull. So of several individuals, presumed to be male, and from Sukhothai in China, or however you pronounce it. So basically, now important. I'll put that down.
Peter, if I could ask, just for those new to the series we've been doing, that skull you had, the darker brown pieces versus the gray.
Yeah.
Is the darker brown pieces, those are the ones that they actually have?
Yeah, sorry, the darker brown ones are they're actual. This is a cast, but that's actually the fossils found, the bone found, or the stone, whatever, the fossilized bit, and the sort of grey bit is what's missing. Okay, so there are certainly portions missing, and they kind of, I guess, mirror in some of the stuff and things like that. But this is a composite individual. Okay, so yeah,
very good.
Now, so important Homo erectus fossils were uncovered for several years at the Chukottian site near Peking, which is now named Beijing. But hostilities sort of brought fieldwork to an end in 1937, and then around the time in late 1941, when war broke out between Japan and the United States, these Peking man fossils mysteriously disappeared, not to be seen again. And it was in 1951 that members of Sinanthropus and Pithecanthropus were subsumed into one widespread species called Homo erectus. Okay, so that's sort of how it all started. Now, there's a lot of contention amongst evolutionists regarding the number of so-called hominin or hominid species. They used to call it hominid, but I won't go into why. But now they're sort of referring to more to it as hominin. Now, so you have it split as they're the ones that favour dividing the fossil record into many taxa or groupings or species, while those laboured lumpers favour the opposite. That is, they consolidate these supposed hominin fossils into fewer species or groupings. Now, according to paleoanthropologist Susan Anton, the famous splitter versus lumper dichotomy is rife in Homo erectus, and alternative species hybridomes abound. Now, in classifying, so she goes on, in classifying Homo erectus, some evolution is regarded as a widely dispersed single species exhibiting considerable variation. That is, so call that Homo erectus sensu lato, whilst others adopt a multiple species approach, which in a simple form, according to Anton, distinguishes early African Homo erectus, that is fossils mostly from Cuviforum and West Turkana, as Homo ergaster, but leaves other African Homo erectus, for example, Hominid 9, and the Asian fossils within Homo erectus, so that would be Homo erectus sensu stricto. So it's sort of, so I generally can put all these fossils into sensu lato Homo erectus. In fact, but I'll discuss it later. I regard them all as Homo sapiens anyhow, but because everybody talks about it, you get to, in order to identify what you're talking about, I will call them Homo erectus, but yeah, but strictly speaking, I believe they're Homo sapiens. So here's a cast of a famous skull, the Turkana boy. It's probably more famous as skeleton, but that's its head. So I've got a, I got the skull here. Okay, so it's actually a juvenile. Okay, so it was discovered in 1984 in West Turkana, and estimated cranial capacity was about 880 cubic centimeters at the time of death, and dated about 1.3 million years ago. I think I'll get to discuss more about this specimen later. As you can see here, there's a lot of damage to where its brow ridges are in here. There's the supraorbital torus here. Okay, so there's a bit of damage to it. That's a juvenile or young adult. Okay. Now, concerning whether a fossil specimen or fossil species belongs in a genus Homo or not, it depends on what is meant by the genus Homo. So if a genus Homo is just a compilation of fossil specimens that were all part of the same human kind, that is, descendants of Adam and Eve, then obviously extinct apish primates such as the Australopithecines, including many Australopithecine specimens wrongly designated as Homo habilis, are omitted. Strictly speaking, species in the genus Homo, such as the Neanderthals or Homo neanderthalensis, Homo heidelbergensis, and Homo erectus, as broadly defined, should be reclassified as Homo sapiens, perhaps as Homo sapiens sensu lato, if they're all part of the same human kind. However, for ease, as I mentioned earlier, for ease of identification, since the physical anthropology literature is sort of saturated with the terms. It's convenient to use the names for different human fossil specimens when referring to them. So here the fossils from the species Homo neanderthalensis, Homo heidelbergensis, and Homo erectus are assumed from a creationist position to be post-flood humans, hence descended from the 8 survivors in Noah's flood, although remains from the pre-flood world cannot be totally ruled out. So here's just to show you, here's a Homo habilis cranium named Twiggy, okay? So basically that's a Homo habilis. And the problem is that it's basically more likely a robust Australopithecine, but it's from Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, discovered in 1968. However, it has an estimated cranial capacity of 590 cubic centimeters. It's likely inflated because it's been compared to some other specimens which smaller cranial capacity, and so it's doubtful that this one actually had a larger cranial capacity than those, and dated to be about 1.8 or so million years ago, supposedly. Now it has a dished face here, sort of a feature of most of the Australopithecines. Now let's put that back. So as noted by Cartmell and Smith, the Olduvai Homo 24, that is Twiggy, has a dish-faced, a feature of the robust Australopithecines, in which the sort of the zygomatic bones sort of jut forward on either side beyond the sort of nasal region here. And from their brief analysis, it seems OH24 may have had more in common with the robust Australopithecines than the gracile types. However, and I quote them, OH24 turned out to have a dished face. This awkward fact bolstered the contention of some that Homo habilis was not clearly separable from Australopithecus. Nevertheless, OH24 differs from any early Australopithecus in several respects. It has a more distinctly defined supraorbital torus and a deeper mandibular fossa. In basal view, it shows signs of a more flexed basic cranium with a more central foramen magnum and a shorter anterior cranial base than earlier gracile types of Australopithecus. Of course, the same thing can be said of some robust Australopithecus crania. So basically, it's a, although some may compare it with Australopithecus africanus, it's like a robust Australopithecine. And I bring this up because a lot of the time evolutionists talk about Homo and humans, and basically some of them, not all of them, some of them, when I talk about humans, they mean everything in the genus Homo, and I could be talking about this robust Australopithecine here, which is obviously not human. So basically, so you always have to be careful when evolutionists talk about the genus Homo or humans. Are they really talking about what we would, as creationists, would say are humans, or are they talking about what they consider as humans, which often is anything that has been put in the genus Homo, even though it doesn't belong there. Okay. Now, so getting back to Homo erectus now, from a creation position, differences in morphological features, that is, feature in the bony anatomy, between, for example, Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, are not interpreted as either due to retention of primitive characteristics in Homo erectus from supposedly early Australopithecine hominins, like the Australopithecines or whatever, or as novel evolutionary adaptations in Homo sapiens. Rather, differences in morphological features are considered as variation within humankind, if you want to call it Homo sapiens sensu lato or whatever. And so whether these differences are caused by genetic or environmental factors, and whether they're considered normal or pathological, that have nothing to do with human evolution. So the differences are basically in features between Homo sapiens, say the modern anatomical Homo sapiens, and Homo erectus, or I should call Homo erectus, Neanderthals, Homo heidelbergensis broadly defined. I call them as robust humans because they have a similar, not the same, there's differences, but they have a similar cranial architecture. And whereas anatomically modern humans, it is a bit different, and we'll get to that. Okay. So anyhow, the challenge then becomes to explain why some of the observed features in the above-mentioned fossil species like Homo erectus are not commonly observed in anatomically modern humans. So this is, I've included some photo just to break the talk up. So this is the cubware skull, used to be known as the Broken Hill, but it's basically from cubware Zambia. It's affiliated with Homo erectus, sorry, Homo heidelbergensis. It was considered Homo erectus by some, but its cranial capacity, around 1,300 or so cubic centimeters, is considered a bit large for Homo erectus. So these days you won't find many people putting it in the Homo erectus category. And as we'll see, discuss further, there's a tendency to basically make and there is to be clear, there is an abundance of Cranial and Homo erectus that are small, but they're not all small. And why you don't find large ones is because it's arbitrary, they're arbitrarily emitted. If they have large cranial capacities, and I'll give you an example, they're emitted from Homo erectus. So that's why you don't get large specimens, cranial specimens of Homo erectus with large brains, is because they're emitted. Okay, and they may be called Homo heidelbergensis instead, or if they're really large, they may just call them archaic humans, as we'll see. Okay, so this cubware skull was recently for a long time there was no official date. It was basically just dated by its morphology or whatever, which is not a good way of dating things. But now it's been given a date of about 299,000 years ago, supposedly. All right. Now locations. Now the Homo erectus, as broadly defined, remains. It's been quite scattered around the place. It's been discovered in the land masses of Africa and Eurasia. Okay, so they appear to be concentrated in several regions, including Java, the central island of Indonesia, China, East Africa, like Kenya, Tanzania, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Georgia in the Caucasus. However, remains have also been found in Morocco, North Africa, Saleh I cranium, in India, Namada cranium. Homo erectus remains have also been found in Turkey, and then Italy, was the Kokobus skull cap, and South Africa. There's been several, which is more recent, the one DNH 134. Now, Ronald Clark suggested long before that the partial cranium SK847 from Swartkrans, South Africa, should be classified as an earlier Homo erectus because it had a lot of similarities to one from Kenya, KNMER 3733. And he's also suggested that the Soprano 1 cranium belongs to Homo erectus, which will also place a species in Italy. But the thing is, you have a lot of these crania, depending on where the cranial capacity, age, things like that, they variously get moved around, whether Homo erectus or Homo heidelbergensis and things like that. So that they can certainly move around a bit. But they're kind of what, I regard basic erectus and heidelbergensis as the same. It's just they're very similar in form. It's just one is a bit larger, so they're arbitrarily given a different name. And here's a image I'll show you the Soprano 1 cranium. So basically, it's actually been affiliated with Homo heidelbergensis, Homo erectus. It's been even named its own species, Homo sopranensis, and also it's been suggested that it's part of Homo antecessor. Homo antecessor is not much of it. This is what it's known of here. So it has a very small face. There's not much of its neurocranium is preserved. Okay, so so certainly there's a lot of contention about where some of these belong. To me, it's just a typical erectus, or let's say a typical robust human. You can see it has its brow ridge there, sort of receding forehead. You have at the back of the skull, you have this angulated occipital. Is that form of the angle between the occipital and knuckle plane forms the angle rather than being rounded, and the knuckle plane is actually quite long at the bottom there. So that's typical of these sort of specimens. So this one has, as I said, discovered in Italy, discovered in 1994, and it estimated cranial capacity has varied from 1,057 to 1,220 cubic centimeters, and it was initially dated about 800,000 years ago, but later it was kind of dated to the latest dating about 353,000 years ago. So the dates move around too. And here's another cranium that I mentioned that before, KNMER 3733. It's affiliated with Homo erectus. There's also, for those splitters, it's referred to as Homo ergaster. So it's from Kubifori, Kenya, discovered in 1975. Estimated cranial capacity about 848 cubic centimeters, alleged date about 1.78 million years ago. In fact, I got the cranium here, I think, somewhere. No, it's in a box, so I won't bother getting it out. But anyhow, yeah, so that's another cranium, erectus cranium. Now, according to Susan Anton, Homo erectus is essentially a cranially defined species, and that depending in part on the sample being considered, workers' definition vary. So back in 1994, a paper by Milford Wolpoff et al. He's sort of he's done a lot of work on Homo erectus, a very knowledgeable person. He said, in our analysis of the features distinguishing Homo erectus from Homo sapiens, we were able to identify only a few Homo erectus characters that we can conclude are not also shared by Homo sapiens. So basically, in that paper, that it was the anterior differences were anterior projecting supraorbital tori, that is the brow ridges, thickening of the cranial wall in both the cortices and diploid. So there's sort of two different types of bone basically layers. So that basically thick cranial wall bones. Strong angulation between occipital and knuckle planes. That's, I just talked about that with the soprano 1 cranium. Dominance of the sagittal length for the knuckle plane over the occipital plane length. I kind of talked about that there. You can see on the left side there that where those green arrows are pointing to the 9, that's the knuckle plane there. So that dominates the occipital plane, which is more on the top there. Okay. And the coincidence of the union is a bump on the back of the skull and the opistocranium, which is the most posterior point back of the skull. And then a weakened femoral pilaster and low pilastic index. Now, the latter two are actually not part of the skull. They're more, the femoral pilaster is a ridge that extends vertically across the femur, and the pilastic index is a measure of mid-shaft shape of femur determined by the anterior posterior length divided by the transverse breadth, and so these are not related to the skull. Now, these multi-regional evolutionists, they merge Homo erectus into Homo sapiens. Said they restricted the Homo sapiens sample to the last 30,000 years. Okay, so for the evolutionists, they believe in the long ages, a period during which they stated it is universally accepted that only humans are unquestionably modern Homo sapiens, and also wrote that of the above-mentioned characters, some actually are present in recent Homo sapiens, albeit rarely, and many are common in earlier or so-called archaic Homo sapiens. In regard to the so-called archaic Homo sapiens, these specimens have mostly been assigned to Homo heidelbergensis, or were, although some finds are now labeled as archaic humans, as I mentioned earlier, particularly the ones some from China, large brain specimens, or that they can't fit into some category that are labeled as archaic humans, particularly if they're not dated in evolutionary terms as being that old, you know. So here's another cranium, rather small component capacity between 721 and 744 cubic centimeters. There's a subadult cranium, KNMER 42,700. It's affiliated with Homo erectus, and from Kubifora, Kenya, and discovered in 2000, and allegedly dated about 1.55 million years ago. I don't have a cast of that cranium. Now, most textbooks, though, they include a much larger range of cranial features separating Homo erectus from Homo sapiens than what was mentioned by Wolpoff et al. Previously. I'm not going to go and list them all. But now, one reason for this may have to do with what specimens are considered Homo sapiens. That there's a lot of confusion in terms. I don't try to sort it out. Is it Homo sapiens? Is it anatomical Homo sapiens? There's early Homo sapiens. There's archaic Homo sapiens. Then there's modern humans. There's anatomical modern humans. So there's all these terms. So and they're sometimes used interchangeably, but sometimes one person's use is different when they uses it may have a slightly different meaning to another. So you have this factor. Another factor may be the frequency at which a morphological character must be seen in Homo sapiens before it is considered common enough to be included as a feature present in Homo sapiens. So, for example, Conroy in his book lists as a distinguishing feature a lack of chin in Homo erectus, which is a distinguishing trait not included in Wolpoff et al. Now, I don't know, but it's just because the latter considered it frequent enough in Homo sapiens not to warrant such a claim. Now, differences in what specimens are categorized as Homo erectus may also be a factor, because a lot of people have what they put in Homo erectus differs a lot too, can differ a lot. So it's also a problem. Now, differences between Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, and Neanderthals. Okay, now on the screen there you have on the right is a cast of the Sangerian 17 Homo erectus cranium, which I have a copy of here. This is one of more complete cranium from Indonesia, Java, Homo erectus crania. Okay, so it's had a cranial capacity estimated 1,000 to 4 cubic centimeters, and allegedly dated about 1.3 million years ago. Although a lot of it dates from Java, there's been things have been there, or whether it's a solar man or the Sangerian remains, things have been dated and redated so many times. It's almost unbelievable. So you take the date. So although I don't accept the long ages anyhow, but even if you did, you have to take some of the ages with a grain of salt. Now on the left is a cast of the Boda Homo heidelbergensis cranium from Ethiopia, and it has one of the most massive spaces of all human fossil skulls. Its estimated cranial capacity is 1,250 cubic centimeters, dated about evolution dated to about 600,000 years ago. So I've got this cranium here too. So now it has a lot of features of Homo erectus. Okay, so it has quite a massive face. To me, they belong to they're just the same robust human type, and basically, sure there's differences, and we'll get to that, but they don't worry a different species. Okay, but anyhow, that's the way they're classified. I'll put these down. So a related issue involves difference. Firstly, before we're looking at the atomic difference between the robust humans, which, as I said, I lump all the erectus, heidelbergensis, and Neanderthals into that, and the atomical humans. Let's look at the differences between the robust humans. Okay, so before we get the other, I'll just have a sip of a. Okay, so a related issue involves differences between skulls of specimens belonging to the broader definition of the groups Homo heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, and Homo erectus. So when viewing casts of fossil skull specimens assigned to Homo heidelbergensis, it is not obvious what exactly differentiates them from Homo erectus apart from the larger size of some of them. Are we dealing with different species or just different size specimens of the same species, with perhaps some of them subjected to different environmental influences and or genetic drift? To elaborate, consider that in the same way that the bubble dispersion may have led to different groups of people taking different subsets of genes for certain traits, for example, blood types, the dispersion may also have led to different groups taking different subsets of genes for variation in bony characters. Hence, as the people groups migrated away from barbel, variants of robust humans such as Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, and Neanderthals, as broadly defined, arose through a combination of genetic variation in bony characters and local environmental factors in a similar way that other characteristics of people groups became established. As time went by, some traits became dominant in some people groups, likely through genetic drift and inbreeding, but absent or close to absent in others. Now, a pronounced robust feature seen in some fossil specimens of Homo erectus and in some Homo heidelbergensis and Neanderthal specimens is the massive brow ridges at least seen in some of them, known as the supraorbital tori. Now, there's no agreement, though, by evolutionists on what function the supraorbital the brow ridge serve. So although there's been several theories postulated, such as including dissipation of heavy chewing forces, reinforcement of the frontal bone, protecting the skull and eyes against blows, and a signaling effect accentuating aggressive stares. Though I'll also say on this thing that so most of these skulls don't have a chin. We do. We don't know. There's no definite function of our chin either. So, so just throw that in there. Now, here you can see this is the cast of the adult cranium Alderway hominin 9, okay, from affiliate of Homo erectus from Alderway Gorge, Tanzania, discovered in 1960. So estimated cranial capacity about 1,067 cubic centimeters, allegedly dated to about 1.7 to 1.2 million years ago. It has enormous brow ridges, so mostly the most probably one of the biggest brow ridges known. Okay, so they're quite large. Now, and cranial thickness at parietal eminence, that's a sort of the a central area in the parietal region. Is about 10 millimeters. Okay, I'll mention that because I may be talking about that later. So just to bear that in mind. That's the thickness there. It's sort of an index of the thickness of the cranial wall bones, or one index anyhow. Now here's another Homo erectus crania, the Damanese fossils. Okay, I got it here. This is the adult cranium D2280 skull 1, affiliate of Homo erectus, and from Damanese, Georgia, discovered in 1999. So estimated cranial capacity about 730 cubic centimeters, or at least that is its latest estimate. I think it initially was estimated a bit larger. Allegedly dated about 1.77 million years ago. So it has more moderate brow ridges. Okay, so they're not all this excessive thing. They're more moderate brow ridges. So that's the. I'm not going to talk too much. I will at the end mention one more Damanese crania, but I'm not going to focus on the Damanese Homo erectus crania. They're very interesting, and there's a lot of I won't say controversy, but there's a lot of debate about some of them. But I'm not going to get into that too much today. Okay, now one way that exaggerated brow ridges occur in present human is through acromegaly. So acromegaly develops if growth hormone levels rise abnormally after epiphyseal cartilage close, as instead of the skeleton growing longer over the bones, instead will become thicker, especially in the face, jaw, and hands. Now, acromegaly may be caused by a tumor occurring in the pituitary gland after adolescence. And according to a textbook item hall, Enlargement is especially marked in the bones of the hands and feet and in the membranous bones, including the cranium, nose, bosses on the forehead, supraorbital ridges, that is the brow ridges, lower jawbone, and portions of the vertebra, because their growth does not cease at adolescence. Consequently, the lower jaw protrudes forward, sometimes as much as half an inch. The forehead slants forward because of excess development of the supraorbital ridges. The nose increases to as much as twice the normal size. The feet require size 14 or larger shoes, and the fingers become extremely thickened so that the hands are almost twice normal size. Now, I just got comparing the Budinsky cranium there with the OH9, try to find sort of similar shots. So there's a different cast of the OH9 cranium below. So on right is a sort of right lateral view, and a sort of front. On the left is a more and on the left is a more is a more front sort of, not fully frontal, but sort of frontal view of it, and you can see that although the Budinsky cranium is smaller proportionally, you can see the brow ridges are much smaller than the excessive ones of hominin 9. Okay, thanks. Now, I'm not suggesting that the enormous brow ridges seen in some robust humans were caused by a tumor occurring in the pituitary gland. However, it seems plausible, though, that some robust humans in their development may have had a pattern of growth hormone release different to most extant humans. That's the point I was trying to make. I don't believe they have tumors, and well, you can't rule it out, but in general, most of them, I don't believe they have tumors in their pituitary gland causing excessive growth hormone production, but it indicates that growth hormone may be involved in producing these brow ridges, and so basically, so they may have a different pattern of growth hormone release in these humans, in the robust humans, compared to anatomically modern humans. Okay, now I'll get back to hormone release later, talking about hormones later. Now, as indicated by the late evolutionary anthropologist Harry Shapiro, who was chairman of the emeritus of the Department of Anthropology at the American Museum of Natural History, some of the differences between Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, and Neanderthals may have been size related. He says, but when one examines a classic Neanderthal skull, of which there are now a large number, one cannot escape the conviction that its fundamental anatomical formation is an enlarged and developed version of the Homo erectus skull. As in Homo erectus, it has a bun-shaped protrusion in the occiput. On the occiput, I don't know if I got that pronounced right. And also, it has a heavy brow ridge, the relatively flattened crown that from the rear presents a profile like a gambrel roof. Its greatest breadth is low, just above the ears, and the absence of a jutting chin is typical. So what I'm getting at there is that, while there's some differences there, they're relatively minor, and that's why I group them as robust humans. So again, this is the cast of the sort of famous Afarensis Neanderthal skull. Again, I'm not the great pronouncer of this. Here I didn't take the jaw out, but this is the skull here. Okay, so you can see the brow ridges here, the receding forehead, face. Okay, and this was discovered in 1909. Estimated cranial capacity 1,640 cubic centimeters. So again, I regard these robust humans. The Neanderthals really had, a lot of them had very large cranial capacity, much larger than the average human, which is about 1,345 cubic centimeters. So basically, in that sense, and I'll show another cranial later, the robusticity has nothing to do with the brain size, okay? Because you're finding these robust humans with large brain sizes. So this one is dated about 68 to 74,000 years ago. Now evolutionists cite changes in the form of the brain case, that is, increase in the parietal breadth, broadening of the frontal bone behind the eye sockets, and at the coronal suture, increase in the height of the brain case and expansion of the occipital plane of the occipital bone with respect to the knuckle plane are simply byproducts of the expansion of the cerebral cortex relative to the brainstem, which causes the upper part of the brain case to get bigger relative to the rest of the skull. According to craniofacial development expert Jeffrey Sperber et al., the adult form of the neurocranium, that is the brain case, is the end result of the preferential direction of the forces set up by growth of the brain constrained by these dural fiber systems. These are connective tissues covering the brain. And without the dural bands, the brain would expand as a perfect sphere. Because the dura mater serves as the endocranial periosteum, it also determines the shape of the caldereal bones. So likely some of the difference in the crania between Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, and Neanderthals may simply be due to difference in brain size and a relatively minor difference in brain growth rate, as brain growth largely determines the size and form of the neurocranium. Add environmental influences on with genetic drift, and it can most likely account for most of the differences between these early post-flood humans. So now, further illustrating the point regarding the similarity of some of these humans is that in some instances, the same specimen may be classified as belonging to different species depending on the paleoanthropologist. Now, I already kind of discussed some of that. Here's another example of it. For example, the Denisovans skull from China dated about evolutionist about 280,000 years ago. And that's the best picture I got that I can show you of it, just a diagram. It has a cranial capacity about 1,390 cubic centimeters, slightly above the human average, the modern human average. And it's tentatively assigned to late Homo erectus by some, Klein in his book, Richard Klein in his book, The Human Career, third edition. Although I don't think many people do, certainly not now, because like I said, Homo erectus tend to be arbitrarily cut off. Once it reaches much above 1,000 cubic centimeters, it tends to be lumped into heidelbergensis or something else. So others group it, like Tattersall group it into Homo heidelbergensis, and others now actually call it an archaic human, whether that's because it's too large brain size in for Homo heidelbergensis, I'm not sure, but anyhow. But it also has affinity with Neanderthals, documented by Cartmel Smith. After analysing the postcranial remains of the genuine specimen, researchers infer that Denisovans represents a cold-adapted population with an overall body form much like that of the similarly adapted European Neanderthals. Now, they're talking about the postcranial bones or the whole thing, but you have these specimen identifying of different species. Okay, so here you have one that identifies with all the three rectors, heidelbergensis, and Neanderthals that I broadly put in the category of robust humans. Now, this is another very interesting crowd. I don't know. I'll show you this because I can't show you. I haven't got a slide, but I can show you this. This is the paper that this specimen published in. It's called late. I don't know if you can zoom in on that. Late Pleistocene archaic human crania from Suqian, China, by Li et al. Published in Science in 3rd of March 2017. And if you go on page 2, there's not a color copy, but I give a sort of a virtual reassembly of the specimen here. Okay, so this one has a Suqian 1. There's a couple of them. It has an estimated cranial capacity of 1,800 cubic centimeters. So that is way above the modern human mean of 1,345 cubic centimeters. And it exhibits Homo erectus features, such as prominent supraorbital torus, that is brow ridge, a knuckle torus, although it's described as small, so that knuckle torus is the back of the head in the occipital region, a low wall height, so the cranium is low, the widest point of the cranium being low, and so they're basically called late Pleistocene Pleistocene archaic human crania by the authors. Now, according to Gibbons, nor are the new fossils late occurring representatives of other archaic humans such as Homo erectus or Homo heidelbergensis, two species that were ancestral to Neanderthals and modern humans. The skulls are too lightly built and the brains are too big, according to the paper. Now, in a brief article, Gibbons discusses a possibility that the crania to belong to the mystery species, the Denisovans, known mostly from DNA. Now, that could well be turned out to be true, and it may also turn out that the Denisovans included specimens assigned to Homo erectus. But getting back to the point, why is the Zhuchang 1 cranium excluded from Homo erectus? It was because it was a fin, as pointed out the Gibbons there, the skulls are too lightly built and brains are too big. But now, if you look at the thickness being lightly built, so you're looking at, say, the cranial wall bones or whatever, thickness of the cranial wall is arguably indicated by the thickness at the parietal eminence. Remember, I gave you the thickness of this hominid 9, which has 10 millimeter thickness at the parietal eminence. Anatomically modern humans have a thickness about 5 or 6 millimeters. Okay, so that the OH9 was one of the extreme brow ridges. So the parietal eminence is a prominent central area on the external surface of the parietal bone, where convexity is a maximum. So I guess if you had a cranium, so it'll sort of be sort of, I don't know, somewhere where it bulges out in this region here. Okay, this measurement at the parietal eminence in Zhuchang 1 is given as 7.9 millimeters. If you read the supplementary information in a table there, I think it's in the supplementary information. I don't think it's in the main paper, but it's in the supplementary information. It's still within the low range of Homo erectus, which is at least given by Kennedy in a paper in 1901, which was 7.5 millimeters. So basically, being lightly built would involve thin cranial wall bones, and that this feature is in the Homo erectus range, along with other erectus-like features, indicate that it is essentially only a large brain size that rules out the Zhuchang 1 cranium from being assigned to Homo erectus. Now, certain things, if you have a really large brain, they may sort of the cranial walls can expand a bit. So you're not going to. So there are features that maybe you can't duplicate in a really small Homo erectus cranium, but just the virtue that the brain is large. But that's just because of the size of the brain. Now, according to paleoanthropologist Robert Zahles, the Zhuchang skulls were initially considered Homo erectus. The thing is, if crania are ruled out from belonging to Homo erectus simply because of a large cranial capacity, and this is just one example, then you will end up with a species of only small brain individuals, but this leads to circular reasoning. The faulty reasoning produces this circular reasoning. Crania are ruled out from belonging to Homo erectus if they have large cranial capacities, and then the evolutionists use this as a proof that there are no Homo erectus crania with large cranial capacities. Okay. Here's another Homo erectus crania, the UA31 crania from Eritrea, the Danakil depression, is kind of it's found in an outcrop of strata that was supposedly 200 to 300 meter deep, but it was found in an outcrop of that strata, and so. But anyhow, and it was discovered in 1995. An estimated cranial capacity of 995 cubic centimeters, allegedly dated about 1 million years ago. Just showing that, just to break up things a bit. That's why I show a lot of pictures, and it's also relevant to the talk. Now, paleoanthropologist Daniel Lieberman, an expert on the supposed evolution of the human head, comments that Homo heidelbergensis and Homo neanderthalensis crania are generally Homo erectus-like, but with a slight increase in face size and relative brain size. In contrast, Homo sapiens represent a shift in craniofacial architecture, with a retracted smaller face and a more spherical wall. So hence, whilst difference between Homo heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, and Homo erectus humans, I call them robust humans, are generally minor, the differences between these humans at typical, extant, and anatomically modern humans are greater. Now, the skull is where the most significant differences exist between early robust post-flood humans and extant modern humans. And as the adult skull is a product of its development during ontogeny, that is the development from fertilization to adult, one must look at development changes to explain these differences. If brain development is slowed down or accelerated, it may have significant implications on the form of the skull. It just shows you a human skull for comparison, okay? So, yeah. Now, it is known that the development of neurocranium is early on predominant over the masticatory, the chewing bits, and the facial portion of the skull, due largely to the precocious or rapid development of the brain early on. The human face itself does not grow uniformly. According to Sperber et al., the upper third of the face initially grows the most rapidly in keeping with its neurocranial association and the precocious development of frontal lobes of the brain. It is also the first to achieve its ultimate growth potential, ceasing to grow significantly after 12 years of age. In contrast, the middle and lower thirds grow more slowly over a prolonged period, not ceasing growth until late adolescence. Completion of the masticatory apparatus by eruption of the third molars, 18 to 25 years of age, marks the cessation of growth of the lower 2/3 of the face. Now, this diagram here just shows you have the brain, the sort of trajectory of brain growth from birth to adult, and so basically, or the birth and age 20 years in modern humans, and the largest increase in brain weights basically occurred in both males and females during the first 3 years of life. Okay, where the values quadruples over that of birth. That is 4 times the size of that of birth after 3 years, but then it slows down, and while during the subsequent 15 years of the brain weight barely quadruples over that of birth. So basically, once it gets to its maximum value, or it's roughly no more than about 5 times that of birth. And it does. There's some decline when you start aging. So about brain weight starts to decline in about 45 to 50 years of age, and reaches its lowest value after age 86 years, which by which time the mean brain weight has decreased by about 11% relative to the maximum brain weight attained in young adults about 19 years of age. Okay, so it's a sort of, I guess it's in the 40s that a lot of things start to decline. Your bones start to lose mass and things like that. Your body, our bodies are not designed to live for hundreds of years. Okay, and so this is a thing I'll get back to. You know, something was different, but we'll get to that. Anyhow, in addition to extremely complicated growth pattern of the cranial base, the bottom of the cranium plays an important role, as indicated by Sperber et al., who noted that, the dependence of the juxtaposed calvaria, here it means skull cap, the roof of the neurocranium, and facial skeleton upon the cranial base confers considerable significance upon the latter's growth behavior, in determining the final shape and size of the cranium, and ultimately the morphology of the entire skull, including the inclusion of the dentition. Hence, change the timing of the growth pattern of the brain, cranial base, and the middle and lower thirds of the face changes the spatial relationship between different parts of the skull, leading to differences in skull morphology. Here's another Homo erectus cranium from Middle of Wash, Ethiopia, the adult cranium Dhaka, and known as Bowie VP2 /66 or backslash, and discovered in 1997 estimated cranial capacity 986 milliliters, alleged date about 1 million years ago. Okay. Now, so getting back to the difference between Homo erectus and modern humans, or anatomic modern humans, evolutionists have no problem incorporating changes in growth rates to explain some of the differences in skull features between modern and robust humans. For example, acceleration in the longitudinal growth of the cranial base early in development of the Neanderthals has been speculated to ultimately, because of a longer and flatter cranial base, have impacted both vault and facial shape and may have been responsible for many of the craniofacial differences between Neanderthals and humans. Now, a mechanism for robusticity would likely involve the control of hormones involved in bone growth and maintenance. According to Susan Crockford, an evolutionist expert in this area, the distinctive skeletal morphology possessed by Neanderthals is almost certainly the result of a pattern of thyroxine secretion, and therefore of prenatal and postnatal growth rates that differed markedly and consistently from that of modern humans. These Neanderthal traits may resemble superficially the pathological changes associated with congenital iron deficiency because they reflect different amounts of thyroxine available for skeletal growth at particular stages of development as compared with healthy modern humans. Now, thyroxine is an important thyroid hormone, and a different thyroid hormone secretion pattern and possible different secretion pattern of other hormones like growth hormone may exist in people with robust skeletal morphology, such as Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, and the Neanderthals, compared to anatomically modern humans. So basically, thyroid hormones are critical in developing a lot of the body's organs. The skeleton is a critical hormone in development. Anyhow, so if there was such a different secretion pattern, it would obviously have to be it would be under some sort of genetic control. I wouldn't know the details of it, and so that's sort of conjecture. But anyhow, but this could possibly account for the major difference in skeletal morphology observed between anatomical modern humans and these early post-flood robust humans. Okay, so this would not be this would be the information in the genetic code of this that would be designed. You can't turn an anatomic modern into a Homo erectus or a Neanderthal by mutations. That doesn't work, or the waiting time problem will be enormous. But you would just get some pathological. You would get just pathology, and I don't see in the general type of the robust humans, although I don't see it as being pathological. Now, you have pathological individuals there, and I've pointed it out with the Homo Naledi, I believe, are pathological, Homo erectus, the Hobbit, and there may be others, and you get things of tumors and all sorts of things. You do get these in anatomic modern humans, but they remain anatomic modern humans, and the robust humans remain robust humans. They're not pathological. The pathology isn't sort of the general nature of them. I don't believe is pathological. It's too widely dispersed. There has to be a common source for this robustness, and it has to get, and likely from Babel and likely from Noah's family. And so this robust form, I believe, must have been there before the flood, and there may be that at that time, being and then we'll get to it, but being built strongly, having thick bones, and being built sturdily may have been an advantage, a survival advantage, particularly if you're living long and your bone. With our current body, humans with bone start doing bone mass at 40, so something was radically different in those humans that lived long ages. And certainly in the pre-flood world, you look at the fossil record, everything is big, and so it was a kind of probably a very dangerous environment to live in. And so so it may have just assisted in living longer, but also it may have been an environment where being built more sturdily may have been a benefit. You know, I don't know the exact nature of whether the skulls look like the ones we see in the post flood. We don't know. They might, but anyhow. So what I'm getting to is a related issue: is why these early humans were in general more robust than extant modern humans. Was there a benefit, and how does it align with the Bible? Okay, now this is a cranium from Cima de la Huesos or Atapuerca 5 from Spain. So this is initially, to me, it looks very Erectus-like. It's a robust human, but it's actually was affiliated with Homo Erectus. Okay, but interestingly, they looked at it, they analysed its DNA, and some of the specimens, the mitochondrial DNA aligns with basically the Denisovans. But then I looked at the nuclear DNA, sort of aligns more closely with the Neanderthals. So some think it's a Neanderthal or early Neanderthal. And the thing is, if you have these specimens that you can identify the type in the DNA, like you have in the Neanderthals and Denisovan, and even Denisovans, they tend to be, well, only scraps are known, but you have the parietal wall bone is very thick, and even the jaw, what's known as the jaw they found in Tibet or whatever, is very robust. They're Erectus-like, robust-like. If you get, and it's believed that there's at least 3 subgroups of Denisovans. Now, if you can identify them genetically in ancient DNA, they kind of independently become they kind of independently being a result of modern humans mutating independently in different regions of the world into this form as a pathology. It just doesn't work. The waiting time problem would be enormous, and you have other things that parallel that were parallel do this sort of devolution or whatever you call it. It just wouldn't work. So there has to go back to a common ancestor. They believe that they must have a common source, and ultimately they go back to likely Babel, unless some humans God didn't tell us dispersed before Babel. They likely will be from Babel. They go back to Noah's the people in Noah's Ark, and ultimately the pre-flood world and Adam and Eve. But I don't know what Adam and Eve looked like. I don't, that we just all we know is what the forms that are the robust humans in this world look like, and they would and so yeah. Anyhow, so basically, sort of getting a bit tangential there, but a fact that cannot be ignored in a creationist model of human origins is the biblical long lifespans of individuals in the pre-flood world, and also the early post-flood Earth, as derived from Old Testament records. In the pre-flood world, lifespans around 900 years appear to have been common, and even individuals born early post-flood, within a few hundred years of the flood having occurred, are recorded as having lived for hundreds of years, much greater than the 70 or so years that individuals live today, although relatively few individuals may live over 100 years. Now, according to creationist Carl Whelan, he's been around a long time, but he used to be the head of the Creation Ministry International. The extinction of, he wrote in 1994, the extinction of human lines with more robust morphology, as in Neanderthal erectus, may correlate with extinction of longevity. The robusticity may be the result of genetic longevity, delayed maturation, or the same populations may have had possibly linked genes for longevity and robusticity. So here can show that it shows in the middle there, the dashed lines, the vertical line shows you when the flood occurred, and it shows you that there's a significant drop in lifespans after the flood, and post-flood it takes several hundred years before lifespan approach those of today. Okay, here's a better diagram from one of Carl's writings in 1908 from Creation magazine. And again, it shows you the decline in the lifespans before and after the flood, and certainly longevity. It was a much more a factor in the pre-flood world. So it seems like there's something in that world that so leave it along, and it was just after the fall, so there wasn't much mutation load either, but certainly they lived long, and the sort of their bodies, there must have been some difference in develop, not just the aging process, but in the development process for them to live that long, and things like that. So now it is reasonable to assume that most of the robust humans, that is Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, and Neanderthals, lived during the first few centuries immediately after the flood. Given their general that they lived the first few centuries immediately after the flood, given their general geological association with post-flood deposit. Okay, so the thing is, what you find is that these robust humans, when you look at they tend to be, there's no evidence that they were preceded by anatomically modern humans in the region. There, the way they're fossilized, buried, indicate in most instances they were there first. Not and so they were They were there early post flood. So I guess I've already talked about it, but it raises the question of why early post flood humans appear to be more robust, and in the model proposed here, as I talked about, it suggests that the morphology of these early post-flood robust humans reflect that of their immediate pre-flood ancestors. At least the robustness of some features may have been different. We just don't know. We don't know how things may have become specialized in certain after the flood. After in the post-flood world, we don't know. We just don't know. And that the answers to the questions about robusticity possibly lies with the longevity of these humans. Hence, one explanation why robust humans such as Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, and Neanderthals had different morphology compared to modern humans, particularly in the skull, is that it could affect changes in development of these early post-flood individuals compared to modern humans, possibly linked to longevity. If initially after the fall of man, humans were designed to live for hundreds of years, then this would most likely have a bearing on development process and timings. Simply put, longevity would probably be associated with changes in development, not just the aging process. Having thickened cranial wall bones, a heavily built face, thick bone jaws, and thick postcranial bones may have been necessary, or at least an advantage, for the body to cope with these long lifespans. Just have a drink. So the humans living pre-flood and early post-flood may well have had longevity genes. These longevity genes may also have caused the robusticity, or could have been linked to genes that cause robusticity. However, the genes or genetic mechanism responsible for longevity and hence robusticity has since been lost or deactivated. Of course, if there was a linkage between longevity genes and robusticity genes, and the linkage was broken, then theoretically you could have robust humans with short lifespans. According to Carl Whelan, writing in 1994, some post-flood humans may in fact have carried their longevity genes to a greater or lesser degree over many generations. These genes may become extinct as the populations did. I suggest that Neanderthal and Homo erectus, for example, give us evidence of genetically distinct humans existing post-flood. These no longer exist today as discrete populations, although some of the genes coding for some of the distinctive bony anatomy were apparently passed on to some of today's populations. For instance, some Europeans carried a distinctive Neanderthal bony ridge over the trigeminal nerve opening in the jaw. Some of these lesser longevity genes may have survived in some such populations, say in the Neanderthals, since these would, especially during the rigors of the post-flood ice age, have tended to be small and isolated. Drift may again have played a major role in the eventual extinction of some of the Neanderthal genes coding for the unique aspects of their very human anatomy. For example, robusticity, large brain case, as well as possibly being responsible for the loss of their longevity, if indeed they had such. All right, so I guess that's enough on that longevity. But so I want to get back to more the nature of, evolutionists. They don't regard Homo erectus as while they say they're human, they don't regard them as fully human as a creationist would say. But there is arguments to show that they have to be human as anatomically modern humans are. And so this is I'm going to use this specimen here, Neanderthals hominid 50, WLH50, as an example to illustrate this. So a problem for evolutionary theories that see Homo erectus not fully human is that there exists fossil crania in Australia, like the Neanderthals hominid 50, WLH50, that are similar in morphology to the Indonesian Nangdong Homo erectus crania, but found in a location in Australia in which, according to Bayer et al., for example, it is often assumed that only modern humans were capable of using watercraft and navigating to distant locations such as Australia and the Japanese archipelago, destinations that would not have been visible to the naked eye from the departure points, even during glacial stages when sea levels would have been much lower. So here's a view at Lake Mungo, which is part of the Philander Lakes region in New South Wales, Australia. So the WLH50 partial skull, the face, jaw, and teeth did not survive, although some hand, arm, and foot bones did. They were found near Lake Pung, which lies close to Lake Mungo. However, if you go there, don't expect to see any water. It's all dried up. It's an interesting scenic landscape to look at, though. Now, the age of WH50 from the Philander Lakes World Heritage Area, Australia, is also relatively recent from an evolutionary point of view to be, for at least recent for it to be Homo erectus, which in age said to lie between about 12 and 32 or 32.8 thousand years ago. And with the author of the dating analysis, Cranial, stating there's general agreement that WH50 is a modern human. However, some see strong resemblance between WH50 and Nangdong specimens, whilst others attribute its robusticity to a pathological source. However, detailed new studies refute the evidence for pathological hyperostosis, that is, excessive growth or thickening of bone tissue of WLH50. In a recent comprehensive comparison of the metric and non-metric features of the WLH50 with Levantine African and Nangdong specimens, Hawkes et al. Concluded that WLH50 was most closely related to Nangdong specimens and that its robusticity was clearly attributable to its archaic rather than its pathologic nature. Their conclusion, following Fawn and Wolpoff, was that WLH50 belonged to the same species as Nangdong and was an example strongly endorsing the evolution model of regional continuity. Now, I don't have a hang on. Yeah, I don't have a photo I can show you, but the above figure shows the rough outlines of the Nangdong Homo erectus cranium on the left, the Philander Lakes hominid 50 cranium on the middle, and a sort of a Klopstow 9 skull from Israel basically is regarded as a modern human. And this is the paper that I based the writing on. So this is from where is it? So from Modern Human Ancestry at the Peripheries, a test of replacement theory by Wolpoff et al. And it's from Science, 12th of January 2001. So if you have that article and you go to 294, then you can see on the top here it shows you that where it was adapted from here. And you can see here that is the Philander Lakes hominid skull there, 50 there in the center there. And so it's a roughly broad outline in there. So people can make their own mind up if you look at that, which one the WH50, even from looking at the outline, whether it looks closer to the modern one on the right, or the Nangdong erectus one on the left. Now, basically, WLH50 is regarded as a modern human in all origins models. Okay, so basically that's according to Wolpoff et al. It is a very robust skull and exhibit many Homo erectus features like continuous massive brow ridges, thick cranial walt bones, plus flat and receding forehead. It closely resembled an Indonesian Nangdong Solaman, or another name for the Nangdong erectus cranius Solaman, Homo erectus serious cranius such as Nangdong. Okay, Nangdong 1, which shown up there. However, there should not be this. Now, this is sort of, before I go on, the history of this is that WLH50, when the out of Africa fair was in its heyday, the replacement model where you have all these humans, and talking modern humans, emerging out of Africa, were, I don't know, 100,000 years or 70,000 years ago, replacing everyone across the planet. This didn't, WLH50 really didn't fit the scenario. So it was either ignored, or it was really that they pushed as a pathological outlier or something like that, or an outlier. It was not, because it clearly didn't fit the model. Nowadays, with basically this replacement out of Africa model has collapsed. Although they're trying to rebuild it, then now they have a version of multi-regional evolution model where they have multi-regional evolution in Africa. Then you have this African humans emerge out again. But then what they're finding is this interbreeding between these robust humans and modern humans all over the place, certainly in Southeast Asia and that. So it's a dog's breakfast, if you know what I mean. But anyhow, when certainly this was a real problem in the when the Out Africa ferry replacement was in its heyday. So now if this there shouldn't be remember that the Nangdong solar remains are supposedly the end lineage of come from the Sinderian remains dated much earlier, which come from Homo erectus remains supposedly left Africa nearly 2 million years ago. So WLH50 shouldn't bear more resemblance to Nangdong erectus cranium, supposedly separated from it for 2 million years. Shouldn't be separated, bear more resemblance to it than it does to the Quasi 9 crania, which it should have a very recent ancestry with, if this theory was correct. So basically, it destroys the Out of Africa theory, basically. Now, if the Out of Africa theory is correct, or was correct, WA50 should most closely resemble early anatomical modern human crania, such as Quavsat 9, the type it is supposed to derive from, but it does not, as reported by Wolpoff et al. Okay. Now, from their analysis that indicates anatomical similarity, Hawkes et al. Concluded WH50 and other late Pleistocene fossils are modern humans. Okay, so make that clear. They are modern humans, regarded as full humans, descendants of Adam and Eve. And the clear implication of the links to Nangdong is that these older Indonesians are Homo sapiens as well. That is a thing. If WH50 is modern humans, everyone agrees with that. But you can't have then their, at least part of their ancestry, whether they Nangdong interbred with anatomic moderns or not. You can't. That would mean they were still the same biological species. So you can't have them. You can't have their ancestry being not human, in this case, and WLH50 being a modern human. So they both have to be modern human, basically. And that's the implication of. Now the thing is, the cranial wall thickness of WLH50 at the parietal eminence. This is what I referred to before. It's also referred to, if it's really pronounced as a parietal boss, but has been measured at 16 millimeters. So that's the upper range of Homo erectus. So this is 1.6 centimeters. Anatomic moderns around 5-6 millimeters. So it's about a centimeter thicker than that. Okay. So remember that even that other erectus cranium with the big brow ridges, that are 1 centimeter thick. So this is one of the most robust crania in the fossil record, and it's a modern human, as me and you. According to Steve Webb, who originally suggested pathology in part may explain his exceptional cranial wall thickness, it is clear that WH50 is a very robust individual with or without pathology, because other heavily developed features are clearly not pathological. So even if it was, and it isn't, likely isn't, the other features, it would still have all these other features, and they're not pathological. So it goes on, beside any pathology that might have moderately exaggerated its walt thickness, this individual would have had a thick walt in keeping with its other robust features. Now, and even if WH50 had some pathology, which seems doubtful, there are several other Neanderthals individuals going here with cranial walt thicknesses within the Homo erectus range, as well as several individuals with well-developed brow ridges also within the Homo erectus range. Now, in their 2000 monograph on WH50, Milford, Woolboff, and Assange Lee stated, we conclude that WLH50 is a normal specimen without evidence of pathology or deformation, and that elements of its anatomy are found throughout the Australian fossil record as it is known today. Our comparisons reveal WLH50 has substantial similarities to Nangdong hominids, but not identify them, and a demonstrable pattern of multiple ancestors that includes Nangdong as part of the network of human evolution in Australasia. Here's a Nangdong cranium, not the one we'll be talking about, but another one called Nangdong 7. Okay, so it's affiliated with Homo erectus and discovered in 1932, a cranial capacity of 1,013 cubic centimeters. Alleged date about 108,000 and 170,000 years ago. These dates of the Nangdong, these have been all over the place. At one stage, they were said to be 27,000 years ago, and depending on sometimes what method you use, they can be hundreds of thousands of years old. It's just you just take it for granted. I don't accept in the first place, but even if you believe in these evolutionary ages, they're still take it with a grain of salt. Now, in the opinion of Webb, who's really studied them and who actually proposed the pathology thing, and he's described much of the fossil material covered from the Land Lakes region. The distinct morphology of some Australian fossil crania cannot have an origin anywhere else other than Indonesia. It is not something that developed in Australia, an aberration of the Ice Age, nor can it be one end of a wide range of anatomically modern human morphology that came out of Africa. Indeed, it was precisely that anatomical modern humans are not cranially robust that distinguishes them as such. Whatever the genetic evidence suggests, the only people around to convey such an outstanding morphology must have been Homo Erectus or its descendants. Now, the Homo Erectus refers to the Nangdong Homo erectus series crania. He goes on, there is no other upper Pleistocene population from whom such a heavily built cranial structure could be inherited. I'm not the first to invoke the Indonesian connection among Australia's fossil hominids. According to Josephine Flood, and WLH50 is massive. He is so robust, he makes Cow Swamp Man look graceful. Cow Swamp is another sort of series of robust crania that some have found connection with Homo erectus. They're found in Victoria. And anyhow, Josephine goes on. The cranium is extremely wide and approximately 210 millimeters long. The cranial walt bone averages 16 millimeters thick. Massive brow ridges form a continuous torus above the eyes, and the forehead is flat and receding. The back of the skull shows even more archaic characteristic, the substantial cranial buttressing. The neck muscle area is huge. The skull is extremely wide. The greatest width occurs very low in the back view, and the difference between the width above and below the ears is much greater than in any modern people. Yet WH50's brain was extremely large. The estimated endocranial volume is 1,540 millimeters, well above the average 1,300 for modern skull. So this person had a very large brain. Okay, it was a robust human, but with a very large brain. Okay, and everyone regards us as a modern human. Now and basically this cranial capacity, which is estimated 1,540 cubic centimeters, would most likely have resulted in its arbitrary exclusion from Homo erectus, no matter where it had been found, as occurred early in in the early discussion with the Zhejiang 1 cranial from China at 1800 cubic centimeters. However, the issue is not with attributing WH50 to a modern human, which is what it is. But here's the Sanderian, a better picture of the Sanderian cranium, 17 craniums I showed earlier. Okay, this is this cranium here. So basically, these are supposedly much older, allegedly dated about 1.25 million years ago, so about 1,000 cubic centimeters in size. But the Nangdong crania supposedly descended from these in an evolutionary lineage, so they were separated from the so they've been separated for supposedly 2 million years from the nearly 2 million years from the humans that emerge out of Africa. So you know that this can't this what the WH50 thing scenario shows is this just can't be so, or it shows for those that believe it's been separated on, it means that they had to be human. Anyhow, so anyhow, going on to Wolfhoff and Lee's paper on paleoanthropology, and you can this one here in paleoanthropology published in 2014. It's free access, or you can download for free. Has a lot of interesting information in it. So if you want to read more about the skull, you can go to that. It's probably the monograph on WH50. So I say the similarities WH50 and certain other Australian fossils have in Nangdong include aspects of the Nangdong remains that Kaifi and colleagues consider unusual or unique in the region. This supports the contention that Australians have some of their ancestry from these Indonesians or a population similar to them. At the very least, these resemblances create a phylogenetically ambiguous situation, unless one is willing to consider the possibility that all of these samples of early to late Pleistocene Homo are in the species Homo sapiens. So if you don't include all these Erectus cranial Homo sapiens, it's a chaos. That's not their words, that's mine. And now to go on, the description that the Nangdong remains are both Homo erectus from the demonstration of similarities to Sanderians, and also and Homo sapien from the demonstration that Nangdong is one of the ancestors of WH50 and other strains, defines a lineage that is difficult to name because no evidence places fossil Australians in Homo erectus. And I go on, instead, every modern scientist is familiar with the Australian fossil record agrees that by virtue of all of their anatomy and the time, place, and cultural associations where they found every Australian fossil now known is unique, unquestionably Homo sapiens. Okay. So as already indicated, the issue is not of attributing WH50 to a modern human, which is what it is. Rather, the problem is caused by not seeing Nangdong Homo erectus individuals as also modern humans, that is, as Homo sapiens and descendants of Adam and Eve. It is also interesting that Nangdong Homo erectus individuals are considered as candidate Denisovans by some evolutionists, as are the Dali, Zhejiang, Harbin, and Ginseng specimens from China. In their extensive review, Cranial reported that evidence gathered on Denisovans to date include a history of numerous episodes of interbreeding with Neanderthals, as well as with modern humans and possibly other human groups. As mentioned earlier, in this review, which I think in this review, which I've written a perspective on in the next journal creation issue, there's that they identify at least 3 subgroups or subpopulation of the Denisovans. Okay, so there's just not one Denisovan, there's several groups of them. Basically, so in a similar manner to not making sense to view the Blandlax, the fossil specimens like WI50 and Nangdong individuals as separate species, nor would it make sense to view some Homo erectus specimens, for example, the Nangdong as human, whilst others, for example, the earliest Sanderian specimens from Indonesia, which show similarities and supposed to derive from, as subhuman. You just can't do that. It doesn't make sense. And in fact, all Homo erectus specimens should be considered as belonging to Homo sapiens, hence to be descendants of Adam and Eve. that is the only way it all makes sense. Okay, so just a bit about this. I'm not going to discuss much about Damanesia crania, but this Damanesia Homo erectus specimen, the skull 4, from Damanesia, Georgia, has a very small cranial capacity, has some pathology with it. You can see that obviously from looking at the upper and lower jaws. They basically individual had experienced extensive tooth loss and resorption of tooth sockets in both the maxilla and mandible before death. So it had a small cranial capacity, alleged age about 1.77 million years ago. Now, so as I mentioned, it said that advanced alveolar bone atrophy, indicating substantial tooth loss several years before death as a result of aging and or pathology. And according to Lord Kipanetsi, or however you pronounce this, the D344, D3900 individual, the second number there refers to the jaw individual, apparently survived for a lengthy period without consuming foods that required heavy chewing, possibly by eating soft plant and animal foods, and by virtue of help from other individuals, which must have exceeded that capable of being offered by non-human primates. This is strong suggestive evidence indicating the Homo erectus populations cared for the infirm among them. So no apes would do that, care for for this period of time. Okay, so that indicates that Homo erectus were human; they cared for each other. Now let's just have a look at the Narraton boy and the postcranial bit. So we're getting towards the end here. Okay. Now, most information about the postcranial anatomy of Homo erectus comes from the discovery at West Lake Turkana, Kenya, in 1984, of the almost complete skeleton of the Narraton boy, also known as a Turkana boy, KM WT 15,000. So it's dated close to supposedly 1.6 million years ago at the time, or million years. Ralph Walker estimated that age of death was 11 to 12 years. His stature at time of death was about 160 centimeters, and his adult height would have been about 185 centimeters if he had grown to adult, although alternatives to all three estimates exist. And the cranial capacity of the boy measured about 880 cubic centimeter at the time of his death. They estimate his adult brain size would have been about 909 cubic centimeters. Now, on the postcranial of the Narraton boy, Homo erectus boy, paleoanthropologist Milford Wolford writes that his skeletal parts are mostly modern and the limber portion are like those of living humans. Paleoanthropologist Ian Tattersall states, below the neck, however, there's no denying that we have in W215,000 in the W215,000 skeleton the first evidence of an essentially modern human anatomy. Similarly, evolutionist Chris Stringer and Peter Andrews note about the Neanderthal boy that while the skeleton does have some unusual features, it is essentially a human in form below the neck, with a tall linear body shape, well adapted to life in hot, dry conditions. Hence, evolutionists first recognized the essentially modern human-like body shape with the appearance of Homo erectus. From the neck down, the Homo erectus skeleton essentially like a modern human. The question now I want to briefly look at is the probability of an Australian Australopithecine skeleton evolving into a Homo erectus skeleton. Actually, I will only look at the part of the skeleton related to endurance running, as this appears to be unique to humans among primates. Hence, how much change would be necessary to transform an Australopithecine, such as Lucy, so that it runs like a human? Now, you may ask, why don't I do it a Homo habilis? That is supposedly the in-between stage. Well, as I talked before, Homo habilis, even evolutionists don't believe it belongs in Homo. I believe it's just a lot of specimens that cranially belong with the Australopithecines, and post-cranially, the few specimens that I have actually cranial remains associated with, like OH62, whereas ape-like or even more ape-like than Lucy. So it makes no difference, okay? And some of the bones they attribute to Homo habilis, that has no cranial association, and likely were Homo erectus anyhow. So anyhow, and this really gets to the nitty of it. This is the probability thing. We're going to look just at this thing, but it's the whole nitty gritty of how can you get the genetic information into the genome required to turn an ape into a human, or any part of it into a human form in the time available. Or, this gets to the problem. So I'm just using this as a way to illustrate. Now, evolutionists Dennis Bramble and Daniel Lee accounted about 16 derived features of the human skeleton and functions adapted for running that were first present in a group consisting of Homo erectus, actually 15 features and derived features, and Homo sapiens, one additional derived feature, but were not present in Australopithecines. So I believe that the Australopithecines could walk optionally upright, as do existing apes to various degrees, whether it's chimps or gibbons, as do some fossil apes were optionally able to walk upright. So just look at that. But going from optionally walking upright to running is a different thing. So that's what we're looking at there. It's because only humans are known to be able to run, or endurance running anyhow. So that's what we're looking at. And so these 16 features are said to be necessary for head and body stabilization, to allow counter rotation of the trunk with head and hips, trunk stabilization, thermoregulation, and stress reduction. Okay. Now, Anne Gorger is an expert in development biology, looked at how long it would take to transform an Australopithecine, such as Lucy, so that it runs like a human. Now, Gorger investigated calculations by evolutionary experts, and apparently the waiting time for one mutation to occur and become permanently present, fixed in a primate lineage is about 6 million years. And if 2 mutations were required, if the first one was neutral in effect, it would take 216 million years. Now, people can argue about the time frame of the time of thing, but in the end, it makes little difference whether it takes a little bit less or a little bit more. Now, this is just for 2 mutations. To generate the anatomical changes necessary to make an Australopithecine walk and run like a human by evolving all 16 anatomical features would require at least 16 mutations. Likely more of each anatomical feature required multiple mutations. Many of the anatomical changes seen in Homo erectus had to occur together to be of benefit. The author mentions individually they'd be useless or even harmful, and getting all 16 mutations to pair and then become fixed within 6 million years since the alleged split of the chimps, let alone the 1.5 million years that it apparently took for the Australopithecines to evolve into Homo erectus, can't have happened through an unguided process, as you know. Now, 216 million years is just for 2 mutations. To generate the anatomical changes necessary to make an Australopithecine walk and run like a human require, according to Anne Gorger, dozens, if not hundreds or thousands, if it could happen by random mutation at all. It strains, she notes, it strains credibility to think that all 16 anatomical features evolved fortuitously in that same time frame, especially if each required multiple mutations. Given these numbers, it is extremely improbable, if not absolutely impossible, for us to have evolved from hominin ancestors by a gradual and guided process. So now, even in the few example mutations are beneficial, for example, a beetle losing its wings on a windy island, which helps it to survive by not being blown away to sea, mutations still do not create the new information needed to make microbes of mankind evolution possible. Rather, they overwhelmingly cause a loss of information. That is, the beetle lost its wings. It didn't gain anything. According to Lee Spatner, an expert in this area, not even one mutation has been observed that adds a little information to the genome. That surely shows that there are not the millions upon millions of potential mutations the theory demands. There may well not be any. The failure to observe even one mutation that adds information is more than just a failure to find support for the theory. It is evidence against the theory. We have a serious challenge to neo-Darwinian theory. Okay. Now I think Donny, I'll kind of leave it there. You there?
Yes, Peter, that was another excellent presentation, and we've had a lot of feedback from the audience, a lot of questions.
I'm sure.
And you are an encyclopedia worth of information, Peter. This has been a fantastic show. I really appreciate all the research that you've put into these presentations. You leave no stone unturned. And that's what I personally prefer when it comes to these
you.
topics. I feel like the information on Erectus is so wide ranging that one could study their entire lives on this topic. There's just so
People
much
do.
there. Yeah, people do, right? Okay, well, that was great. Let me just get into some of these questions, the ones that are the most related. Let me see here. I'll ask a couple of my own clarifying questions just for the audience.
Yep.
So basically, what we're looking at, because I really appreciated your conclusions there on biblical longevity and what best explains the morphological or phenotypic variation found in Heidelbergensis, Erectus, and Neanderthalensis. And so, going back closer to the flood, you would consider these robust humans, and a lot of their unique morphology could be due to increased longevity in the past, including genetics. They would have retained a lot of the pre-flood longevity genes, if I understood correctly. Is that right, Peter?
Something like that. Yeah, the information had to come from somewhere. I don't see like I said, there may be some of them may have pathology as modern humans do, but the general form, they're everywhere. It just can't be pathology. There'd be too much coincidence. So I don't see. There's not. And the thing is, with pathology, usually it makes the skeleton dysfunctional. I don't see anything dysfunctional about their being sturdy, but built. It's not. It's not a. So like I said, my look, it could be wrong. I'm just trying to drive the needle in the right direction, and because we haven't got all the information, and so I'm hoping it stimulates people to look into it. Maybe they can improve on it or things like that. But I'm just trying to make sense of what the Bible says and what the data shows, and sort of something that I know evolutionists, they're going to scoff at the long ages and things like that, but that's what the Bible says. So they can't accuse us of inventing longevity because and at the same time saying we believe the Bible because that's what the Bible says. So we're using the Bible in our interpretation. And there's a lot of things like even the Bible, the dispersion of when God changed the languages of people to disperse them. If you think about it, to access our memories and things like that, and language or names of things, you have to access sort of whatever the mind-brain connection is, synaptic connections in the brain. So there must have been some change in that too. And even at the fall, there was change, more pain in giving childbirth. So there was always some change in form. Maybe we don't know all the details, and obviously the form, the anatomical modern form, the information must have been, unless it was subsequently put there, it must have always been in the genome. We just don't know when and how things were switched on or when they were or whatever. It's just hard to know, so we don't know when. Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns, but I'm not a great believer in big coincidences. So I think so. The information must have been in the genome. It's just how and when it was expressed and the details and things like that. Yeah.
Would it be wrong or erroneous for we as biblical creationists to look at the modern human phenotype? So look at extant humans and assume that this is what early post-flood or even pre-flood humans look like.
No, I don't know that. Like that could well have existed at Babel too. We just don't know the variation. So I can't say that they didn't exist. It had to exist at some stage. So I believe the anatomical modern form likely existed at Babel and things like that. But there was a lot of variation. But I believe that because these robust ones they tend to be found very early and very dispersed. So now, if you think about it, what would aid you in migrating to long places? Living long would be an aid, wouldn't it? You wouldn't stop. you wouldn't be slowed down so much. So if the early humans lived longer, they would actually aid their migration. Maybe that's why they and stuff like that. So there's these things. So I just don't know. I just don't know. What the information must have been there, because you don't get this sort of information by chance, because it's a sort of different cranial architecture. But I believe most things are the skeleton is driven by hormones being expressed or at different stages of development. So there must have been a plan, something there in some humans that was different, when it was implemented and so. But I believe there must have been. It does reflect the pre-flood world in some extent, because if they were these robust humans tend to be the ones earliest that are found early on, and there's no evidence that the modern ones were there before them, at least not very little of it. And so they must have some reflection of that. Now, whether they became very specialized in their feature, like, whether the small Homo erectus one are a specialized feature, they became specialized, as opposed once they sort of migrated and stuff like that. And there may be things that that explain this, why so many of them small, the environmental conditions, starvation conditions. So that there are things that may have affected their brain size. We just don't know. But I think that I'm more thinking of the thicker, even postcranially, they tend to be sturdier, and they're basically built stronger, but the architecture was slightly different, and so so I'm just trying to relate it to what could possibly explain it. So look, it could be wrong, and that's the one clue if you have is longevity. And so what would you do if you live longer? Well, you can't live for hundreds of years in our current body. That's one thing we know.
Right.
So something had to be different and genetically different anyhow. So something had to be different, at some stage. And yeah.
Since the hominins that you focused on, the robust humans,
Yeah,
specifically Heidelbergensis, and I know we're just guessing here, but could Noah have looked very similar to what we see in Heidelbergensis?
well, it could. Look, the thing is, it's Heidelbergensis. It's the archaeomans with 1,800 cubic centimeter brain. So that's what people think of these things, and I think of a small brain. It's not. I don't know, but I think it's sort of we. So I don't want to say what someone's, because it may, what someone actually looked like. So it's speculation. Right. But it's possible. It's possible. The thing is, an evolutionist. My work years ago said I had Neanderthal features in my skull, so yeah. I didn't take offense, and I don't know, maybe because I have a bit of a receding forehead. I don't know. I'm not sure what he was referring to, but it's not a. The thing is,
it's normal human variation.
Yeah, you got human variation. We have a chin. Sometimes an exaggerated chin doesn't look. Maybe it doesn't look. People don't want that either. So some have exaggerated brow, which probably don't look like great either. So and so we just sort of we tend to look at the world from our vantage point. You got to look at from the vantage point of that time and place. We just don't know.
Well, you mentioned the chin, Peter. I'm putting this question up on the screen. I'm not sure if you can see it, but so it has to do with the chin and some of the unique characteristics found in these hominins. And so the question is, did early humans universally lack a chin, with the more prominent chin that we see today coming about later?
It seems like most of them didn't have there are some that have you could argue have a look, but I can't. I won't say the universal, because I don't have the knowledge to say that. Just don't have the information to declare that. But generally speaking, they did lack. The robust humans kind of lacked the chin, that they did. There are some modern humans too that don't have a chin either. But most people have a chin to varying degrees. So it's a feature that we don't really like a suggestion, but as a feature we don't know exactly what what uh, what a value it has. Like the brow ridge, we don't know what value it had. Did it have? Was it like in a pre-flood? Where was it? Was there something advantage to having that? Was it something to do with
Right.
the environment? Something we don't know. You know, we just don't know much about the environment of the pre-flood world, and it was a carry-on effect into the post-flood world, and we don't know what happened when say the robusticity was linked to longevity and had the linkage is broken, then you can get in this post-flood where you can get funny effects with as the funny patterns of hormone secretions, which may so it could even be different in the pre-flood world as well. So there's a lot of things there. We it just seems like the people were robust in nature, but what the average form was in the pre-flood world, I wouldn't like to guess too much, but I've yeah, it's just it's not wise to and things like that. But you get some idea with some of these robust humans, um, but then again, the anatomical form is there as well, and so yeah, there's a lot of interesting questions. So I think it's an area that's right for people to investigate and may have
Since-
better answers to.
I guess since in your presentation you talked a lot about the robustness of these human types, could a possible explanation for the more
Yeah.
prominent chin coming about be the fact that after the flood into the post-flood world, your robust human types, they would get smaller over time. They would lose a lot of those genes that you mentioned for longer lives. And so could it be an
Yeah, well, look,
adaptation to
possible.
the shrinking skull?
Well, it is possible that it's related to us because they get a smaller face. So that it's possible it could be something to do with that. Yeah, and then how that genetics plays out, it could be something like that. Yeah. So we know a lot of the receding forehead can be also due to the development of like in acromegalia, like I talked about, at least in existing humans. Uh, Acromegalia with excess growth hormone after the epiphyseal cartilage closes off, and so into the sort of excess growth hormone after that, it causes the brow ridges, but also that causes the receding forehead. So there's some of these things, but it may have a different explanations in these robust humans. So you don't want to be too stringent about it, but it's all interrelated. The whole That's what I'm saying. If you change one part of the skull grows, so the forehead grows more at the pace of the cranium, whereas the middle face and lower face grows at different rates, and the bottom grows at another different rate. And so basically, if any of these rates are changed, then you're gonna get different facial characteristics, and along with
Right.
you have the genetic, you probably have genetics features for these features as well. But then when the growth rate changes or related bones growth rate changes, it's going to affect one and the other.
Because if I could add, Peter, even those, I'm not saying all of them, but there are at least some in the evolutionary community that explain the prominent chins. They argue that evolved because the human skull got smaller, and at the same time the teeth, the jaw, everything about it got smaller, and so this was an adaptation to for resistance, basically. But isn't that kind of what we're saying, from robust humans to less robust?
They're using an evolution explanation where it was saying, whilst the information must have been in a genome to start with, maybe not all was expressed or when it was expressed.
Right.
But because I don't accept the evolution explanation, because you have the waiting time problem of if you because if you look at both the anatomical and modern and robust forms of the skull, they don't look pathological to me. And so it's a symmetric features, and but the face has gotten smaller in modern humans, and that may the chin may well be an effect of that thing, but it's not because of an evolutionary change. It's because of different information expressed,
Right.
genetic information expressed, and it all affects it, and it has a carry-on effect to other features as well.
I think the waiting time issue that you've pointed out, how long it takes for these beneficial mutations to accumulate and then become fixed and expressed in morphological change, I think it's very powerful, and it demonstrates the validity. If you could speak to this, I believe we would both hold to design diversity or created heterozygosity, where basically humans were front loaded with pre-existing variation that could be revealed over time.
Yeah.
And so these changes we see, rather than being due to evolutionary history, they are due to the expression of pre-existing variation. Is that right, Peter?
Yeah. Well, that's what I believe. You know, it's just like I said, I don't believe in great coincidences. And the thing is, you have with anything, you have this waiting time problem, and they have to get for any change, they have to get the mutation fixed into the genome, so both chromosomes carry it in the whole population. And so basically, you have this thing, depending on the size of the population and things like that, and the generation time and things like that. But it all takes a long, long time, and I and that's why, you know, that's why the problem of evolution is so great. They ignore this. They don't deal with it at all, or they don't deal with the waiting time problems. And the thing is, I also like to say on the waiting time thing is, um, largely because we're discussing skulls, they're discussing skulls and things. They don't have to deal with the real complexity is inside our bodies. So my area is the brain, and maybe there's something I'd like to do in the future is go inside the brain, because the brain is known as, say, often said, the most complex organization of matter in the known universe. But people don't understand. But it's just not a throwaway line. You need to go in there and look at the circuitry of the brain and all the transmitters. You have all these thousands of different variables at the same time, millions of signals, currents going everywhere. That is so. Whilst the skulls are, you can argue for this and that, the brain is the one. And essentially the brain has to be the information in the brain has to be encoded in the DNA to build it, but then it has to function, and this is the most and to do that is just unbelievable functional complexity, and when you look at that, then you really that's when you can really go on the offense and say that this overwhelming complex functional complexity cannot be created by pond scum or nothing, out of nothing, by nothing, for nothing, and this is and so you combine the two. So what I've done is, so in this sort of series, I've kind of done with more the skeleton, which but you can't really go into the information problem of the waiting time problem of getting all these complex biological systems and connections, and let alone the connection between the brain and the mind, which we don't even know, which is physical. But the waiting time problem is huge, but it's for the skeleton, but for the brain, it's on many orders of magnitude larger. How that system got put together.
So we as creationists, we don't require millions of years for mutations to add the necessary genetic variation for change and adaptation, since we argue that most DNA variation was built in from the start. And so all it has to do is come to the forefront, has to be expressed.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a question here. Well, I've got a lot of questions. You're a fan favorite, Peter. So it's been an excellent series. And so here is a question from a skeptic. And so we do appreciate our skeptics and non-skeptics. That's why we do these live, so you can send in your questions. So he's asking, is it fair to say that the more basal features so more primitive, I think is the way evolutionists would look at that, in humans are associated with evidence that evolutionists would associate with greater age? In brackets, he says, whether such evidence is valid or not.
Well, with greater age in the individual, or greater age in terms of the fossil was found, hundreds of thousands, or allegedly 100,000 million
Individual, I
years
think.
ago. Okay, I don't know. I think the robust features, or that would be, it's not age related, in a sense that it's not, of course, because I lived long. That I don't believe in. It's the development. Like I said, it's from the development. Now, whether they had a different maturation rate, possible, but it doesn't require it. It's just that they develop differently. And so the brow ridge, receding forehead, a lack of chin, everything was, when they became adult, was pretty much there. No, mate, a bone sort of tissue get replaced as we live. So we may not live. We're not going to look the same as when we were first adult, when we die. But essentially, these robust features are there when you get to adulthood, and they may change slightly as you get older, but it's not caused by age. I don't believe it's caused by aging.
I should clarify. So, Mr. Anderson, you just put up a clarifying question. He says the question was with respect to whether more basal features are associated with older fossils.
Well, the thing is, it depends on even evolutionists, like there was a Homo erectus skull cap found in Turkey. When I think I outlined it in the current journal Creation, in a book, The Human Lineage, by Cartman or Smith, I think. They initially, when it was forget the exact details, but when the skull was thought to be about a certain 800,000 or something, I can't remember exactly, years old, they leaned towards interpreting it as Homo erectus. Now, when I redated, it was sort of found to be half that or something. It was okay to go along with Homo heidelbergensis. So a lot of one has to be wary about a lot of the features that are archaic. I just change it. Even sort of the interpretation changes as the dates change. So I don't necessarily, and the thing is, for instance, some of the features in the Homo erectus cranium from Eritrea are probably more modern than the so-called more modern, or less archaic than in the Bodo cranium from Ethiopia. But the Bodo cranium is dated a few 100,000 years later. So it's given heidelbergensis, and it has a brain size a bit larger, and the other one is usually put in Homo erectus. So it just depends, and it really depends, and the thing is, you found Homo Naledi, which I regard as that was dated a couple of 100,000 years ago. I regard them as Homo erectus, but there's pathology in them. So again, that doesn't. And initially they were thought to be, at the base stem of Homo erectus around 1.8 or 2 million years ago, before they actually dated them. So now suddenly they're, when they're dated, it didn't turn out that way. So there's a lot of discrepancy there.
Right.
Well,
it's a lot of overlap. A lot of overlap.
There's a lot of overlap there. All I'm saying is that the robust forms tend to be found early post-flood, but there's a lot of overlap between them, and their features, some that, like the Dmanisi cranial, one skull is really robust, and I think it's pathological, skull 5, whereas the other one that I show here, it's got and has really big brow ridges, whereas one is quite modest. So this one is dated 1.77 million years, and the Oliver hominid 9, which is an extreme brow ridges, is dated about less than that. I forget what the age it was, but
that's interesting.
I could go and check it, but I think it was dated less than. It would have been dated less than that, and so the features don't necessarily line up with the way that evolutionists have it lined up either. Okay, and the thing is, the dates of evolutionists change a lot too. Most of the things are redated later, and they find a different date. So yeah. I don't know if that answers the questions.
If you look at an evolutionary phylogeny when it comes to the hominin fossil record, even they will have to admit that there's significant overlap and coexistence between the robust humans like Neanderthalensis, Heidelbergensis, Erectus, even Hobbit and Naledi, who we've focused on in past shows. So there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. They found that the Hobbit that there's actually a pygmy population of modern humans on there in Flores, and they did DNA on them, looked at the DNA, but they didn't find any sort of Erectus or Hobbit DNA. But we don't know what that DNA looks like. But I found there's traces of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA in that population. So, but what the Denisovan bits we found indicate they're very robust themselves, and the Neanderthals are robust. So that may be that the Erectus ones are one of the several Denisovan populations are Erectus, and the Hobbit may, like I said, I believe it. The Cretinism best explains it, but it could have been robust humans like that, Erectus or someone like that, interbreeding with anatomically modern humans there too, and that could be the product of the Hobbit and it's with Cretinism as well. So there's a lot of things that we don't know, but a lot of the stuff in Southeast Asia, probably a lot of humans are Denisovans, I suspect, and a lot of evolutionists are suspecting it too. And they're now classing them, instead of saying, they're now saying Homo sapiens subgroup, whatever, rather than saying Hominins and Afarensis, because I realized that these had to be humans. Because that is indicating they were interbreeding with everyone. Denisovans interbred with humans. So how could you classify them as not human?
Right, especially considering the most prominent definition of species. I've seen lectures from paleoanthropologists, evolutionary paleoanthropologists, within the last couple of years where they have admit that Neanderthals are us. They are humans, just adapted to cold ecoglacial environments, they'll say. Same species. And so a couple quick questions on my mind for you, Peter. The evolutionary community, they look to Erectus as living on this earth for how long? Somewhere between 1 million and 2 million years?
Well, they believe it about the earliest Erectus finds I found is about 2 million years ago, from the one from South Africa that they recently published on. And the thing is that when they went extinct, well, the thing is that I'm sorry, the various good. It used to be the Nangdong Erectus are the ones that were dated to a little while. They were dated to 27,000 years ago, which is very, very recent by their standards. But that's been changed now to 100,000 years ago or so. But roughly, they believe Erectus lived from say 2 million years to 100,000 years ago, with the Nangdong ones the most recent. I think that's the current scenario. It may be different. And the thing is, a lot of the Chinese fossils, have Erectus features in them, but they call them archaic humans now or something like that. Is because either because of their date or their brain size or something like that.
So according to their model, Erectus has lived on the planet for much longer than Homo sapiens, us as modern humans who would have only been here for a couple 100,000 years. And so earlier in your presentation, you talked a little bit about Turkana boy, this Homo erectus specimen. Is that the most complete skeleton they have of Erectus?
It would be the most complete Homo erectus skeleton for sure. Yeah, there's not much. That's why it's more cranially defined species. There isn't that much. There's a
lot of fragments.
There's another skeleton, but it had some sort of really disorder, whether it was vitamin A poisoning or something. It wasn't really much use. And there's some skeletal elements from postcranial from the Dmanisi finds, but not anything like the Turkana boy. So that's the most complete skeleton.
So I wonder then, I appreciate those answers. if the human evolution story is true, and Homo erectus lived on this planet for somewhere between 1 million and 2 million years, where's all the bodies? You'd expect if evolution were true, you'd find more than just fragments, one semi-complete skeleton with Turconaboid. I've read that if you were to take every single erectus fossil, you could fit it into a car, the trunk of a car. And so if evolution is true, where's all the dead bodies? There should be billions of them if they lived on the globe for 2 million years. Peter, can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, you'd think there'd be a lot more. I haven't really thought about that too closely, but they often maintain that a lot of these things, they maintain a low population size, so they wouldn't necessarily believe that they grew in populations like we did today with billions of people. But they had relatively low population size, and I gather they probably sort of say that they were eaten or whatever, and most of the bones got they didn't bury it dead or something like that, and got eaten by carnivores and just dried up and went away like a lot of the things go in the savannah or Africa. They don't get fossilized. So I'm not 100% sure. I haven't really thought about that too closely, you'd probably I guess it's an interesting question. So I'd have to think more about it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So here's a question from Christian Stevenson, and he says, in reference to that question, how is that variation accounted for unless mutation can result in new information in the genetics of the population? For a little context, Peter, or even my guess, because we talked about it a little bit earlier, we're not saying that all of those changes occurred through mutation, but that the majority of variation was front loaded. It's design variation. Peter, can you speak to that?
Well, I was saying that the information you can have information in a genome, but it may not be expressed. Like it may be recessive. Right. It may be that it's controlled by there may be regulatory elements that control it, and it hasn't been switched on. There may be some triggers environmental for it. So basically, unless mutations, so mutations aren't going to the problem mutations that you can't. That's not going. You do get mutations, but as a point out of genetic entropy, either they're really bad and they do get eliminated. Few, if any, are really good, but they're not. It takes too long for them to come fixed in the population, and so you're not going to get any new information that way. If it's going to take 1 million years just to get one mutation fixed in the population, then it's just, and one mutation is just trivial to what you would need, and so basically that's why the waiting time is just too great. There's just so many difficulties, and a problem mutation is that most mutations, a lot of them, they may not be that bad, but they may be just slightly bad. But they don't add anything. But particularly, you may get more mutation, and it may actually be very harmful in the end, and that's what causes the genetic entropy and breakdown. And so basically, that's why you have the genetic entropy theory by John Sanford, who you see eloquently has put it, and he's done a lot of important work in that regard. That basically we are, I think it's roughly 100 mutations per generation is added to our genome without being able to get rid of it. But it's not sort of the mutations you want. It doesn't really add information, but it just keeps building and building, and then in the end, it's like you're putting information. So say you had a computer code and you put random information on it. After a while, that you're going to start to malfunction. Now we have a lot of redundancy in our bodies that maybe some computer codes don't have, but after a while, things aren't going to work. and so basically, so I don't see how what I'm talking about. The differences in you have inbuilt variation, and that inbuilt variation would include the anatomical and robust forms. Whatever they express is just maybe a larger variation, but it would have to be front loaded. It would have to be there, or at where or subsequent put there by intelligent design. You just don't get that sort of thing by mutations, because the waiting time will be forever long, and that's why evolution cannot happen. It just isn't working. And like I said, the skeleton is the easy bit for evolutionists. Try to brain, look at all. There's where you got the systems where you what the waiting time problem of even every time you're looking at the visual information. You got millions of currents, parallel ionic currents flowing into the back of your head, being disturbed in a couple of dozen regions to reconstruct a signal that or interpret a signal that looks nothing like the information it carries, blend it together and combine it then with the information from auditory cortex or any smell you may have, and present it to us in essentially real time, maybe a millisecond or so delay, to create that system without intelligence or any foresight and any plan. It's ludicrous, because think of all the variables and think of the waiting time just to get one of these connections right. It's just, yeah, if evolutionists really thought about what they're saying, they wouldn't be evolutionists. I and that's why I'm glad I studied the brain, because that's you realize the daunting problems they have. With a skull, you just can look at that bit of bone, but look inside the skull, and if and in fact, just the fact you have a mind, it's not even physical. You can't even, your thoughts aren't physical. How does that relate to the brain? It's a very interesting question, the connection between that. But if it's not connected to the brain or any physicality, how could it evolve? How could it evolve? How could something non-physical evolve with something physical? There's another problem. So there's a lot of issues. Yeah, there's a lot of issues there. Anyhow.
So basically, there's a lot of morphological adaptability built into each kind, each organism, and deleterious mutation accumulation. That's not going to provide the kind of beneficial diversity that design diversity would allow for. And we're not talking about anatomical change either. We don't see that type of evolution in these sophisticated systems. It's morphological variation that's essentially front loaded. Peter, I like to say mutations, as you're pointing out, deleterious mutations that are slightly deleterious. They are akin to the rust marks, the bumps, the dents, the dings on your car. They're not really adding anything good.
No.
Yeah, they're adding diversity, but not necessarily good diversity.
It's a good analogy, yeah. And eventually the door falls off.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Each mutation's like a single rust molecule on a car. On its own, it's inconsequential, but it's not going to prevent the eventual deterioration of the car. And so here's a follow-up. A skeptic in the chat. It's kind of related to what you said earlier.
Yeah.
And right here. No, we answered that one. Let me see. The chat's moving quick, so hopefully I didn't lose it. Basically, he's asking what evolutionists call basal or primitive, like the lack of chin or do we see that in the fossil record where there's this gradual accumulation of these traits? I think it's this one. So he says, is there a pattern? Basically,
I don't know. There's any
more primitive to extant human.
I think it's more. I think you see people have various sized chins today. Some have more pronounced chins than others, and some in the fossils you have. Some have. Most of these robots, they don't have a chin. They'll be very straight, or sometimes recessive chins. But you don't. But it's even with in modern humans, you have a chin. I don't think it's not a gradual switch on. I think it's just either it's there or it's not there. Some, they argue, have an incipient chin. Maybe some of some, but not in those, but not in the Erectus Heidelbergensis. What they know, that, or Neanderthals, that generally don't have a chin. And I don't really, personally, I don't think it's that. It's just a chin it's more structured different else. I don't necessarily think it's people call it primitive, but that's only with evolutionary lenses.
Right. Evolutionary assumption.
It's just a if you want to call it, I don't think having a chin or not a chin makes that much difference. It's just sort of, and in fact, yeah. So yeah, it just sort of. I think the person is trying to think that they're gradually evolving this. Well, I don't think it shows any evidence of that. Yep. And even with the brow ridges, there's no indicating they get smaller over time. It's just some have smaller, some have larger brow ridges.
Right.
And there are humans today who have brow ridges. There's one famous boxer, 7 foot tall. I wouldn't go up to him and say you look primitive.
Right, exactly. You're asking for trouble. And so there's overlap in the fossil record with all of this kind of variation. I mean, right.
Yeah.
So it makes more sense, I think, from the design diversity model.
Yeah.
And here's a question that came in from Brother Jerry. Appreciate the $2 super chat here, the support. And so he's asking if humans are primates, given the similarity, in the sense that evolutionary taxonomists look to the great apes and other primates, and they include humans in that group because of shared traits.
Well, you can categorize anything the way you want to categorize it. So they categorize humans as primates, but there's a lot of differences. And if there's been a lot of controversy over the difference between, say, a supposed closest relative to chimps, the genome differences, but if I believe the 1% is incorrect, but that would mean 30 million base pair differences. Maybe 5% is probably more. Maybe that's the figure. I don't know, but that's what a lot of people are saying. 5% differences between humans. That's 150 million base pair differences between. If that's correct, 3 billion letters. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of differences, and so. Between us, so to DNA, we're not very similar in that regard, and there's a lot of different features. We have two legs, 2 arms, but the chimps would have a lot more muscular, they're more stronger, and things like that. Their limb proportions are different. There's a lot of in the skull of everything is different. So. You can say similar. We can be similar to kangaroos and two legs too. So it's just a way you want to classify. But I certainly would put humans in a different category altogether. And stuff like that. Evolutionists like to group them together because that reinforces the theory, and things like that. I don't. Well, I say primates. Well, yeah, I guess it depends on how you classify primates. You can, if you're broadly classify. I mean, you can. I don't like calling human animals because we're created in the image of God. You can classify humans as primates of those certain features, and that if you and things like that. But we do stand out from the rest of the animal. We're not animals, and we should be a separate kingdom. We are separate in many ways. So
right.
Can I just excuse me for a sec? I'll just go. I'll come back in a minute.
Yeah,
just
no problem. Take your time, Peter. I'll address some of these comments. So a couple of the problems with the evolutionary explanation for genetic degeneration or genetic entropy is that the evolutionary model requires fixation, where these mutations become fixed in the population, stuck in place, in order to explain species-wide change. That's what they need, is species-wide change. But this appeal to making the no selection zone extremely small actually undermines the evolutionary molecular clock, or the basis for it. Because now if selection's acting upon all these mutations, then which mutations are being fixed? And so they are stuck between a rock and a hard place. The reality is most mutations are slightly deleterious. Selection can't see them. Mother Nature can't remove them. And so they become subject to genetic drift. They spread throughout populations, and they lead to genetic sickness. They degenerate over time. And so sure, selection can see your biggest, your most damaging mutations, the most harmful ones, okay, the disease causing ones that limit reproduction. They can possibly even amplify a large beneficial mutation. But even when you get a beneficial mutation, they turn out to be reductive, functionally compromising to organisms. So that's not going to counterbalance any of the damage. The problem has to do with what Peter was talking about, the mutations that are low impact, that are nearly neutral. They're slightly deleterious, but they're not big enough for selection to see. Those are the ones that drift. Those are the ones that damage populations over time and essentially lead to extinction. And so, Peter, it's good to have you back, my brother. I know we're coming at the 2.5 hour mark, and so we'll start to wind things down a bit, as I do appreciate your time. And we could answer questions all day, so we got to wrap it up somewhere. I'll get this question up here, Peter, and I do appreciate just how comprehensive you've been in this series. So this comes in from Sydney Raptor. Question for Dr. Line. Of the species that you've presented, so Heidelbergensis, Erectus, Neanderthal, what is the time frame, presumably in the early 6,000 years, so from our model, that all the variety developed in over such large world areas?
Well, it would have. We believe that humanity ultimately comes from Adam and Eve. There must have been a lot of variation there, but there was a bottleneck at the flood, and so Noah and his family is three sons and daughter-in-laws or whatever. All humanity comes from them. So all the genetic information must have been included there, unless God put something subsequently in there, which we don't know of. It would have had to come from there, and so that would have now at the time of Babel, which is I don't know, a century or two after the flood, there was a dispersion, and again, unless there was some that kind of did migrate, most of them have stayed at Babel, which again we don't know about. Most would come from Babel, and they would have dispersed, and so again you would get genetic drift where some people would have different information with them, and that would kind of mean that you would get special features in some people and other. And so if you had a lot of people that were robust in morphology, that some of those traits would become peculiar, like the Neanderthals may come from a regional small group, and then they dispersed, and some other robust may go other. And you do have anatomical models too. So I don't know I don't know how that all works, but if longevity was associated with them, it would help those that were robust were able to disperse probably easier, migrate longer, because they would have longer lifespans to do it in, and not sort of settle down. To have children or whatever, when we slow down so much by that and having to do all that in the time frame that we currently have. But That information, if there was there would have been a lot of information in Noah's family, and that would have been derived from that. Yeah.
Right. And they're just taking a subset of the pre-flood diversity anyway. So I'm just brainstorming here, but this came to mind based on what you were saying. You bring up a lot of good points. At the flood, you have Noah, his wife, their three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, but then you got their three wives. So their three wives are not necessarily related. Maybe two were sisters. I don't know. And so within those three reproducing couples, couldn't you have variation for the Erectus phenotype, variation for the Heidelbergensis phenotype? Maybe one wife looked a little bit like Erectus and another one looked a little more like Heidelbergensis. Any thoughts on that, Peter?
I think that kind of looked. I don't necessarily differentiate them. It was just a certain expression of a hormone pattern, release hormone pattern, mixed in with other expression. They may have varied, and if you get a combination of certain patterns, you may get variation in robust form and with other bony features. So I'm not exactly sure what. I'm just saying that. So yeah, but I'll take your point. There may have been some would have had stronger robust features than others, and in different parts than others, and some may have carried features that may develop averages, some may not, and there would have to be the face, that smaller face or not, but these get back to genetic information that triggers hormone expression, which say increases the rate of growth of the face or the cranial base, which affects the face. So it's very complex. But what in essence you're saying is correct. Yeah, that these daughters would have carried it, and the sons, and you get all these mixed, and you get recombinations and stuff, and they have a lot of, and these have a lot of kids, and so we got a lot of variation. But ultimately, it was kind of certain groups will look more familiar as they sort of group together, and so you get some differences in traits and stuff like that.
Right, because as these traits segregate in these populations that become isolated, they start reproducing within those groups. You get those unique features, essentially fixed in those specific groups.
And you could, and you can, you also have the environment. It would have been a pretty rough time living, particularly migrating early flood, when there was no one ahead of you. There's no built up cities.
Oh, right.
And so it could have affected the morphology, like with Neanderthals, so they were cold adapted. It may affected some of the morphology. There's no doubt about that. And it also goes back to some of the stone tools. Well, it's critical because they were primitive, but you go out in the desert somewhere and see how you go.
I wouldn't fare too well.
That's the thing, people think if you have nothing and you go out there, well, maybe a stone tool is a good way to start. And the thing is, and a lot of these stones, the older ones, actually, this smashing rocks together, and even monkeys can do that. But the Acheulean or the Motu tools, the hand axes, they were more kind of they required a human mind to do, and so they probably would leave a lot of the easier ones that you smash rocks behind and take the more complex one with them as they moved across. But you just got to think about what the world was like when they moved into it. Not what the world is like now. And I dare say a few people would probably right now, if put out an environment, they wouldn't survive.
It was the rekindling of culture, the rekindling of civilization. And so, of course, we're going to expect all of these stone tools. And I think those are some great points. I'm glad you brought it up, because here's a question, and I almost forgot to ask you. I think it's important. Would there have been any significant effect on the post-flood humans, let's say for the first 500 to 1,000 years after the flood, due to the higher loads of radiation from the flood itself, such as uranium, in these newly exposed rocks?
Well, it's hard to say. There's a lot of. If it was, it wouldn't have been good.
Right.
But if it was, wouldn't. It's not the sort of yeah. Of course, that could relate to pathology in all sorts of ways, but it's not going to change the nature of them. It's just going to, like I said, you may get robust humans, but erectus with pathology, but with a cancer, but it's not going to change that it was erectus. If you know what I mean. But it could. Yeah, I'm not sure but there would be. There could well be. We just don't know. Which environments they move into. But it's possible. Yeah.
And so quickly, as you know, we have evidence from mitochondrial DNA for a single woman that we've all descended from, evidence from the Y chromosome from a single man that we've all descended from, based on extant human genetic variation. But then the evolutionists, because we have a question here on mitochondrial DNA and genetic variation in extinct humans like Neanderthals and Denisovans, going to these rocks that would have higher loads of radiation and these harsh environmental conditions, could that not drive hypermutation, more mutations, and therefore negative genetic diversity being added to these populations pre-flood, to explain why some of them, like Neanderthal DNA, is divergent in some ways from extant humans, Peter?
Well, if that's the case, then it wouldn't be sort of functional DNA. It'd be more, sort of slightly deleterious or very bad.
Right.
So it'd be DNA that's sort of there, but it's not doing anything, and it hasn't been eliminated because of the waiting time problem is too great to get, and if it wouldn't have useful changes wouldn't have had the time to get fixated in these populations.
Right. It'd
And
be
so,
deleterious mutation accumulation, basically.
yeah, but yeah, look. It's possible. It's possible you could have it. That could happen. Yeah. I'd be wary of accepting any sort of dates on these using these clocks, because they all have to be calibrated with alleged dates of fossils somewhere along the line, where it's chimps or monkeys when they supposedly live. So I'd be wary of the calibration. So there are episodes we don't know, and so these molecular clocks that they may indicate some sort of, like in humans, they may give an indication, but I'd be careful about assuming too much about
Right.
the time factor, because it all based on the rates are all dependent on what you assume about your ancestors. So if you believe it was 6 million years ago, you're going to get a different clock than if you believe it was 6,000 years ago. At least that's the way I think of it.
Well, and it's interesting because those are excellent points. I have a couple papers from just the last couple of years, 2022, and they talk about how mutations in DNA repair enzymes due to radiation, due to negative environmental conditions, can actually damage these DNA repair enzymes. And as a result, you get more mutations accumulating in somatic cell lines, Peter, and also in the germ cell. And so maybe this was the case with some of these early humans that were exposed to radiation.
It's possible though. Look, it's possible. Yeah. You can't rule it out. But whether it's in the main human line or not, that's the question. But it's possible some of them were. But if it was really bad, then I probably wouldn't have survived to reproduce if it was really bad. So it must have been slightly bad, but not really bad. But yeah.
Some might say mutation accumulation like that could explain why some of the Neanderthals went extinct. Is that something you'd look to, or no, Peter?
I don't, because they were kind of widespread. They weren't just one area. They were in different
Across
regions.
Eurasia, right?
So I don't think so. Maybe some of them, but In general, I don't believe so.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I guess as we start to wind down, I think we talked more than enough about Erectus and Neanderthals. We talked about this significantly in episode 1, where you really focused on the Australopithecines and Lucy. So I do want to recommend anybody in the audience who hasn't yet seen part 1 and 2, please go check those out. But maybe we'll start to wrap it up with this, because I know it's an important one. People are always wondering about the Australopithecines and Lucy, and you've done such excellent work. I think you have some of the best answers on Lucy out there, Peter. And so basically, here's the question. If gibbons walk upright today, right, they're walk bipedal, could other primates in the past, like Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, have also walked upright, even if dissimilar to the way we as humans today walk upright?
Yes. That's what I discussed. It's not a big deal. The anatomy, like I said, it indicates, like, if you look at the sacrum and stuff, it probably wasn't even evolutionists. I discussed this. It's sort of the center of the body, of the top of the sacrum was very small, and wasn't seemed like designed to get the upright up to carry the loads of upright walking constantly. And some of the features on the sacrum indicating the ligaments that bind the sacrum and ischium together, the sacrotuberous ligaments, they when they stand upright, they kind of sort of keep the sacroiliac joint stable, which is necessary for upright posture. Again, these ligaments, the features on the sacrum indicates they were weakly developed, which again means probably they weren't, the posture standing upright or walking upright wasn't that well established. So I think they mainly, so that was Lucy's that was Lucy's sacrum part of its pelvis. So I think they did optionally upright. I mean, you think about it. God creates these primates with 2 legs. He didn't create them just to walk on their hands or their head. He designed them also to walk, use their feet to walk in some capacity. So it shouldn't be. So it's not evidence for evolution if they use their feet. That's just, to me, that's rubbish. So basically, they could have walked optionally upright, and I think that some of the footprint, they're totally these side A prints, which are indicated a divergent big toe, and different to human, may have been a sort of optional Australopithecine walking upright, because you have human feet there as well, and so that sort of explains that the human and Australopithecine together. But yeah, I kind of discussed this a lot before, so and that's what we're winding up. I don't really want to won't go into it much more, so they can probably look at that video. There's a few hours of it.
Because that video was almost 4 hours. And so basically, to wrap up that Lucy topic, when evolutionists look to the hip of Lucy and argue that it's so similar to the human hip, there exists enough dissimilarity there to
you got to look at everything in concept. It was also, I mean, when you get things in human too, particularly pathological humans, like the flaring ilia and stuff that go sideways. In the Lucy, they're really flared sideways, and the ilia, the surface is not concave. It's like that doesn't curve like it's more flat. So that there is significant difference, and they're very small. So if Lucy were a human, it would have been like a hobbit. So it's like finding a hobbit in the middle of the desert somewhere, because it was a really small in size. So the probability of that being humans really diminishes, and it was an adult. And then you got to look at its legs, and the female, and other features of his body. Its cranium was like very apish. So I think people get too hung up. I don't know why, but people get so hung up on this. It's a no-brainer. It probably walked optionally upright, like gibbons do. I don't know if it was any better than a gibbon walking upright, to be honest. And I know gibbons were better than chimps. So so being better than a chimp is not a great bar, to be better than a chimp.
So, right. It doesn't equate any kind of relationship. So you've done some excellent job on Lucy and the Australopithecines in general. I think the series so far comprising 3 episodes or seminars. We've touched on a lot, Peter, so I do really appreciate your time today. Your slides were fantastic. I was really into your presentation. So was the audience. We still only got through a fraction of the questions, but we are at 3 hours. So I do want to wrap it up here, Peter. And it gives the audience enough to digest and to work through. And so, Peter, I'm going to hand it to you, my brother, in case you had any final words and final thoughts. And I got to say again, you're much appreciated. Your work, Peter. You're a blessing.
Yeah, no, I just don't really have anything particular. I think the only reason I'm doing is, this is because, Jesus Christ is really, he is God. I have zero doubt about that. And the things that happen in my life, I can't even, I don't talk about that, but there is something beyond this life. I can tell you, I can 100% tell you that. And Jesus Christ does exist, and he is real. And so, don't sort of believe the lie that you're somehow there, just an accident, evolutionary accident. You're not. You're created in the image of God. He loves you, and he has a purpose for you. And if you don't know him, I would ask him something, put him to the test. That's how I ask God question. Ask him a reasonable question. If you don't have, he'll answer it in one way or another, because he searches the earth looking for people who want to know him. But you got to want to know him. If you don't want there to be to God to exist, well, he's not gonna. He's going to leave you alone. But if you want God to exist, you want the purpose in your life, then seek him out, and God will find you. Okay, and the things that God has in store for those that love him, that commit a life to him, you can't even conceive in this side of eternity. But eternal life, and you won't have suffer the consequences of eternal death. And like I said, the day I committed my life to Christ, I think I said in the first thing, I had one of the dreams I'll never forget. I was taken to the lake of fire and shown that was where I was heading. And, that's a wake-up call. And I wouldn't want anyone to go there. And so please, yeah, that's my thing. God loves you. And so, all these arguments, it's not important in the long run. If you believe in Jesus Christ, he is the Son of God, and he died for you on the cross, rose again from the dead after 3 days, and make him your Lord and Savior, and so repent of your sins and give your life to him, invite him into your life to be your Lord of your life. Believe in him, then you have eternal life, and your sins forgiven. And then basically ask him to forgive your sins, and that's the most important thing you can ever do in your life. So yeah, that's what I want to say. God bless.
Amen, brother. Excellent final words. That's setting yourself up right for eternity. And so it's not always about refuting arguments like we're doing here. It's about winning souls. It's about preaching the saving message of Jesus Christ. The Bible says the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he that winneth souls is wise. And so you're a wise man, Peter, and I appreciate those final words. I think we'll wrap it up there, as that's the best way to wrap up a program like this. So to the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate the feedback, the comments. Thank you to both the skeptics and also the non-skeptics that have joined and have engaged both Peter and I in tonight's topic, which is exploring the evidence for human evolution. And so with that, God bless you, Peter. We'll chat soon. And Standing for Truth is out.